Unmute.
So you can do that.
Oh.
Oh. Hey, Tutu.
So I think that works. Okay.
Hey, thank you guys for coming here. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to come down from some events that are wrapping up on the 8th floor. So we'll start about 2:15. So just wanted to let you know we are going to start here shortly, but just a little delayed. So thank you so much.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Okay. Testing. Testing.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon. Thank you all so very much for coming here. Really appreciate the folks that are here. I know we've got a few folks up on the 8th floor that are watching from there. And from what we're seeing from all the texts that Anthony's getting, at least, a lot of folks online that are watching. So thank you very much for everybody that's joining us from wherever you are. Welcome to Rebuilding Resilience. We have a really fantastic lineup the rest of this afternoon and tomorrow, focused on discussing the challenges and, even more importantly, the opportunities for rapidly rebuilding domestic industrial-based capability and capacity. I want to thank Capital Factory for hosting this. Thank you to ATI, Advanced Technology International, for sponsoring this. And thank you to you all for being here and being part of this. I'm Christopher Zember. People call me Z. I'm a senior fellow for industrial-based resilience, and I work with several of the offices that you'll be hearing from this afternoon. I spent most of the past 25 years of my career working in the intelligence community, defense research, defense engineering, national security, international security. And I can tell you, when I talk to people, friends, family, folks that I met that aren't in this business, and I would try to tell them what I was doing, they think they had at best a vague appreciation for what it meant, and maybe it was important and maybe it mattered to them. But what I'm doing now, focused on alternative approaches to rapidly rebuild domestic industry, friends, family, random folks that I meet immediately understand and appreciate not just the value, but the impact that it has on them from a day-to-day basis. We have experienced supply chain disruptions across U.S. industries. Every American citizen, resident, domestic business has experienced them. We've all felt the pain of it, and it's very real to everyone that's here. The challenges are really critical, they're really difficult, and that's why we all need to work together on this. So I really appreciate you all being here to help us think through and talk through some of the things that the department's working on, folks from industry, great thought leaders from the finance community, working together on how we can actually stimulate and rapidly grow domestic industry. I want to thank our keynote, Mr. Paul Kramer, for being here. Really speaks to the seniority of the Pentagon and folks from the administration, the level of attention that this issue and this topic is getting at the highest levels. And so you'll be hearing from him momentarily. But I want to walk through really briefly just what we have in store, just so you understand not just what we're going to talk about here, but the couple panels that will follow, and then into tomorrow as well. So immediately following the keynote, we're going to have a panel that will talk about some really unique and interesting authorities that, frankly, are very relevant to startups, to emerging industry, and I think most people don't know enough about unique authorities, and over $1.5 billion in the FY23 budget, and more coming in 24 as well. So stick around for that. Following that, we'll have a small business innovation panel focused in particular on helping small businesses to not just get to that prototype stage, but to move beyond that, to build manufacturing capability, production capacity, and grow and scale as a part of the industrial base. Tomorrow we'll return at 10 o'clock in the morning with a panel focused on supply chain risk mitigation. We'll then move into a panel that'll provide some really interesting and unique tips for navigating the defense market. So I know a lot of folks in this room, as much as we've tried to reach out and make it easy to work with the Pentagon and figure out how to get that funding from DoD, you spend a lot of time chasing down the right opportunity and talking to this person who then says, well, go talk to that person, it's actually a better fit, and then talk to somebody else when you could be spending that time and should be spending that time growing and developing your business. So this panel will talk about some of those tips and insights from across folks that have worked in different parts of the government and on the financial markets to help with that. After that, we'll move into a panel looking at how startups are really impacting international security and talk about Ukraine in particular, and as an example of how startups are impacting international security and how we can better enable and empower entrepreneurs and startups to have that impact, that important impact. And then lastly, tomorrow we'll wrap up with a panel called Garage to Government, focused on some great leaders from the finance community and manufacturing, looking at how you can use creative financing and manufacturing best practices, again, to rapidly scale your business. So that's what we have. Thank you again to you all for being here. I want to hand it over now to Micah Dolan from ATI to introduce our keynote, and then we'll keep going from there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Z. As he said, I'm Micah Dolan. I'm with ATI, and I just want to welcome everyone here. ATI is a nonprofit based out of South Carolina, and we build and lead collaborations to solve the nation's biggest challenges. And I'm really honored to be here today. Z left out just one little programming note. We've got a happy hour that we end this day with, so please stick around for that. Have one tomorrow as well. It's my honor to announce and introduce our keynote, Mr. Paul D. Kramer. Mr. Kramer is a career member of the Senior Executive Service since June of 2013 and is currently performing the duties of Deputy Under Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. In this role, he is responsible to the Undersecretary of Defense for all matters pertaining to acquisition, contract administration, logistics, and material readiness, installations and environment, operational energy, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons, the acquisition workforce, and the defense industrial base. Please welcome Mr. Kramer.
Okay, I think you can hear me. Good afternoon. It's so good to be here and out of DC. 90 degrees outside. I looked in the weather forecast back in DC and it was 43 degrees. So Unfortunately, I got to go back to that tomorrow. But you know, again, I'm glad to speak this afternoon, and I'm pinch hitting for some other folks within ANS, but still, I want to provide some background as to how we got to where we're at within our industrial base, domestic use, and you know what has transpired over roughly 50 years, and why we have such an emphasis on regrowing our defense industrial base, and it really has come to light over the last year, and we have some prepared remarks. I'll talk through what our strategy is going forward, and then we've got these great panels, as Z put out, that'll help answer some of the finer details. All that says when I read the bio is I'm way up here. The action level is where the real experts rest. And my job is to make sure that we get a policy and then we resource that. So I'm going to sit here and listen to the questions and answers and take those back to make sure that we are resourcing the very important things that we need to do to go forward. So I'll jump right into it. Resilient domestic industrial base, which includes both commercial and defense manufacturing and sustainment, is a critical element of U.S. power and preserves and extends our competitive advantage. U.S. reliance on sole source suppliers and foreign sources pose risk to domestic capability and capacity to produce the products we require. The importance of this issue is captured in the National Defense Strategy, which highlights that our military success is dependent on having a healthy and robust industrial base. Furthermore, U.S. competitiveness on a global scale depends on our ability to out-innovate our adversaries, and that is a critical part of our work. Finding new ways in which we can build enduring advantages across the industrial base, we continue to focus on resolving production bottlenecks for key systems by identifying and mitigating long lead time drivers to expedite production. There are a number of critical technologies that we must continue pursuing. We must increase our efforts to redirect the critical technology demand signals from foreign to domestic manufacturers as we invest in expanding manufacturing capacity. We monitor the supply chain closely to ensure that the Department of Defense has access to critical technologies when and where they are needed, including semiconductors, energy storage, and other areas that are equally important to non-defense programs. American businesses and consumers. DoD is committing significant resources to address the need for innovation and critical technologies, including work with industry to encourage and support the expansion of domestic production, also known as onshoring. But as we think about innovation, we must also think about resilience. The fragility of the defense ecosystem is top of mind in a way that has not been for decades. And efforts are underway across the U.S. government to understand and mitigate some of our most glaring vulnerabilities. For more than 50 years, market forces in the United States have prioritized supply chain efficiency over supply chain resiliency. And events in the last few years, including COVID-19 and the Ukraine conflict, have crystallized the need to prioritize and invest in resiliency across all our dual-use ecosystems. We are very aware that we are facing shortages in critical components like microelectronics, and also critical skills like those required across the manufacturer ecosystem, such as welding, pipe fitting, and machining. The last few years have revealed serious gaps in the U.S. industrial base, including an over-reliance on foreign manufacturing and a shortage of trade and skilled workers. As such, supply chain resilience and workforce development are not just economic priorities, but are now national security imperatives. So how did we get here? Over time, many domestic suppliers have lost business and/or exited the market due to unpredictable DoD procurement practices and competitive pressures from foreign nations. The concentration of global supply chains for strategic and critical materials in foreign nations creates risk of disruption and politicization of our trade practices. For instance, China's lower production costs make importing materials more profitable than producing the same material domestically. It reduces the likelihood of U.S. private capital investment, leading to erosion of the profitability and competitiveness of U.S. manufactured material and resources. For instance, China has captured more and more of the global steel market, pushing U.S. suppliers out of the market, making it harder to get steel for products such as dishwashers and automobiles and rockets and military vehicles. Low volume and volatile procurement practices driven by U.S. government and DoD practices have compounded by China's price advantage by generally high startup costs here in the U.S. and limited profits of our U.S. businesses. The U.S. is in a technological and economic race to maintain our manufacturing dominance against some very capable strategic competitors across the globe. Emerging technology is essential to our national security, but emerging technologies can only be leveraged for technology overmatch and economic competitiveness if it can be put in the hands of every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Guardian, and public consumers that needs it. To do that requires a modern industrial base with a capability, capacity, and skilled workforce needed to produce these products. To compete against our pacing challenge, we need to be able to produce key systems at speed and scale and get it in the hands of our warfighters. Actions we are taking at DoD. 2 years ago, President Biden issued Executive Order 14017 titled America's Supply Chain. Within the first 100 days of office, aimed at revitalizing, fortifying, and in some instances, rebuilding our domestic supply chains. In response, the Department of Defense published our Securing Defense Critical Supply Chains report focused specifically on addressing challenges in high priority areas, which included kinetic capabilities, energy storage and batteries, castings and forging, microelectronics, and storage strategic and critical minerals. This report was delivered on the 24th of February of 2022. And those that recall that, Putin invaded Ukraine on February 20th, 2022. So not a lot of airplay on our report, but it is important, so we're trying to do another rollout. So what I want to do today is just highlight those 5 key areas. First, start with energy storage. Batteries are key components to many DoD systems. With the advancement of battery technology and broader movement to electrification, we have recognized the need to adapt by updating and effectively communicating requirements to the market. We have taken several steps to achieve this, including establishing DoD's lithium battery strategy, coordinating with the interagency through the Federal Consortium Advanced Batteries, which includes the Departments of Energy, Commerce, and State, meeting all international partners to discuss battery standardization and assessing our acquisition policies, such as domestic price preferences for DoD battery systems. We're focused on microelectronics technologies, which are instrumental to DoD's advanced capabilities. The share of domestic modern semiconductor manufacturing capacity has declined from 37% in 1990 to just 12% today, and unfortunately has also fallen behind foreign competitors. We have a microelectronics sector team, we'll hear a little bit more about that later, working to address challenges including supply chain visibility, foreign dominance in state-of-the-art microelectronic manufacturing, procurement of secure microelectronic components and obsolescence issues. For example, in our efforts, we have focused on identifying technologies for DoD prototypes in development as a critical component of reducing DoD technology development timelines, engaging with leading semiconductor producers, which ensures national security priorities are fully addressed, and collaborating with the Department of Commerce to implement the CHIPS and Science Act. The CHIPS and Science Act will provide substantial subsidies for domestic semiconductor manufacturing, as well as additional funding for science and technology innovation in next-generation microelectronics. Our work with the Department of Commerce is focused on ensuring national security imperatives are addressed by funds provided under this legislation. Strategic enablers that we're going after for our priority sectors. In addition to these specific supply chains, we are also focused on strategic enablers that underpin overall mission success and supply chain resilience, such as cyber posture, small businesses, manufacturing capabilities, and workforce development and growth. Our strategy encompasses efforts being undertaken internally within the department, as well as those in collaboration with external stakeholders. For example, DoD works with industry to develop assurance and security standards for critical industries like microelectronics. Aligning these types of standards helps ensure the mutual security and resiliency of commercial and DoD microelectronics supply chains, while also increasing industry's visibility into DoD's future technology needs. Across the entire industrial base, our success depends on resilient supply chains, healthy competition, and access to the full innovation of our American small businesses. We continue systematically identifying and mitigating pain points in doing business with the Department of Defense, particularly for new entrants and non-traditional players such as small businesses. Small businesses are essential to driving our economy, moving innovation forward, and ensuring our national security. U.S. competitiveness on a global scale depends on our ability to bolster entrepreneurship, and that is a key priority. Finding new ways in which we can help small businesses become active participants in the defense ecosystem is important. Of approximately 347,000 manufacturers in the U.S., 99% are small and medium-sized manufacturers. Those American small businesses within the domestic industrial base, both now and in the future, produce the innovation and capabilities that help build enduring advantage for the United States Department of Defense. In fiscal year 2021 alone, small businesses made up 73% of the companies doing work with the department. And for 8 straight years, we've received an A rating from the Small Business Administration in meeting our small business contracting goals. Later this afternoon, you will hear from our Office of Small Business Programs, as well as several domestic small businesses, about how they have leveraged these programs to scale their capability and capacity in both defense and commercial markets. The U.S. is in a technological and economic race to maintain our manufacturing dominance against some very capable strategic competitors across the globe. A strong manufacturing base underpins every element of our economy and national security. And so we will have to outthink, outcompete, and outbuild our competition. Manufacturing converts research and prototypes into reality. We need to push beyond prototyping to help deliver industry's products for today's economy and military needs. Following my remarks, you will hear from members of our Manufacturing Capability Expansion and Investment Prioritization Office about the resources and authorities that they are leveraging and applying to accelerate expansion of our domestic production capacity. The founder of Austin's own Center for Manufacturing and Innovation will also speak about our partnership with his team, focused on harnessing innovation in manufacturing, enhancing supply chains, and developing a more robust domestic industrial base by leveraging and simulating private investment. Talk some about our workforce. Top of mind today is finding ways to bolster the defense workforce. Across both the commercial and defense industrial bases, a skilled workforce is a critical enabler of a modern 21st century economy. The industrial base faces fierce competition in recruiting, training, and retaining today's skilled workers. In the U.S. manufacturing, the gap between open positions and available workers is not expected to close anytime soon, with an estimated 2.1 million unfilled jobs by the year 2030. Workforce shortages threaten the U.S.'s ability to build, sustain, and modernize our national security capabilities. DoD's Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Program continues its efforts to develop both regional and national workforce development strategies, working with regional partners across the country to organize its efforts. This afternoon, you will hear from the Innovation, Capability, and Modernization Director, who oversees IBAS, about the details of what they have accomplished to date, along with future priorities and opportunities. We also have the founder of Project MFG, a key IBAS initiative, who will address the important work his team has undertaken to attract more skilled workers to our domestic manufacturing industry, while also advancing their skills in current and emerging manufacturing tools and technologies. We continue to encourage careers and education in not only STEM fields, but also critical manufacturing jobs, working with other federal government agencies as well as state and local governments and schools across the country. Closing the 2.1 million jobs gap will go a long way towards ensuring domestic businesses have the workers necessary to mitigate weaknesses in critical supply chains. We recognize that we are addressing a problem 50 years in the making, and our current efforts are a down payment on a very large and complex set of challenges. Continuing to build supply chain resilience requires strategy, commitment, and collaboration. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about rebuilding resilience for our domestic dual-use industrial base. Economic security is national security, and our policies and priorities reflect that mentality. And thank you for being a part of sessions here at South by Southwest. I hope that you not only stay for this afternoon's panels on rebuilding a resilient domestic industrial base and small business innovation, but also come back, as Z said, for follow-on sessions. As they address, our critical issues with supply chain risk management, navigating the defense market, rapidly scaling production, and the growing role of startups in international security. I appreciate your time and partnership. Addressing these challenges requires a whole-of-nation approach, and we are looking forward to working with each and every one of you on our current initiatives, as well as incorporating your input to our future strategies and programs. Thank you for your time. So back to you.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate your time.
Sorry. Thank you.
All right, I want to ask the next panel to come up and join me on the stage here, and we'll get started. Yeah, you can, probably in the order we're speaking. That sounds good. Awesome. All right, so as they're coming up here, let me do a brief introduction of each of them. These are folks I've really appreciated the opportunity to work with, in some cases over the last decade plus. One thing I'll tell you, so Anthony leads the Manufacturing Capability Expansion and Investment Prioritization Office. I know that's a mouthful, but if you listen to those words, it's a pretty important mission. How do we expand manufacturing capability? How do we prioritize investments? And he'll talk about some of the key programs there. Anthony came out of the munitions world, spent a lot of time leading programs, developing capabilities in that space. And so the good news is, as a bureaucrat, he's used to blowing things up. And sometimes that's what we need to do, right? So thanks, Anthony. Adele Ratcliffe, the Director of Innovation, Capability, and Modernization, overseeing the IBAS program that Mr. Kramer mentioned. I've known Adele for a handful of years and really appreciated her expertise in navigating the bureaucracy, in finding interesting ideas, whether it was when she was working with the Mantech program, setting up the U.S. Manufacturing Innovation Institutes, which are a massive achievement from several administrations ago. But finding interesting ideas is important. There aren't that many people that know how to navigate the bureaucracy and get those ideas actually put into practice, get them funded, get the contracts issued. Adele is expert at that, and looking forward to hearing her comments on what she's been working on and what she'll be doing in the future. Following them is actually two examples of folks who had interesting ideas, and I want to highlight that for folks in this room. Ray, Dick, and John Buer brought interesting ideas to Adele and Anthony, and subsequently these two got them funded and projects underway. And I share that with you because folks in this room I know have fantastic ideas, and I want you to meet these guys that have great experience. Ray has a great background in Department of Energy, standing up challenge competitions, doing a lot of commercialization for defense technologies, and he and I have worked together for a handful of years and really appreciate having him up here. John Buer and I met maybe about a year and a half ago and had some really interesting discussions. John comes from a banking background and also runs a drivetrain company for hypercars. Interesting combination of experiences and background, but it gives him a unique perspective. And one of the things that I find myself often saying to John is, just tell us what's really basic to you, because it's actually really novel to most of us that don't understand banking in particular. So with that, I want to hand it over to the panelists to kind of offer some opening remarks each, and then we'll move into Q&A. And following some Q&A that I'll have, we are going to have some microphones to go around the audience. And so please, as you have questions, make a mental note of them, and we will definitely make opportunity for you guys to ask questions as well. So Anthony, over to you.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. So thank you, Z, for the introduction. Again, my name is Anthony DeStasio, and I'm not going to repeat the long job title, but suffice it to say that the new organization that's been stood up really focuses on two major things: prioritization and investment, and really incentivization of everything from schools, universities, industry, and a couple of things you heard from Undersecretary Kramer that I kind of wanted to reiterate and why this office was stood up. Years ago, when I was doing research and development, as Z mentioned, it was mostly on weapon systems. And in that sort of community, you can get stuck hyper-focusing on what the requirements are for the Department of Defense. One of the reasons this organization that I'm in charge of now was stood up the way it is because that's no longer the case. Of course, in certain areas like rocket motors and munitions, the DoD is going to procure more, but those same rocket motors supply NASA, SpaceX, and even some fireworks companies. In other areas where the DoD is a very, very tiny fraction of the production of a certain material like microelectronics, we, the department, will not be able to sustain any of those industries by ourselves anymore. So you heard Mr. Kramer mention a whole of nation sort of response to the challenges at hand. We are working towards that goal, but we are also trying to partner with the interagency partners that we have, like Commerce and Treasury and Department of Interior and State, because there's a lot of things out there that need fixing. My organization really has its finger on the pulse of where the immediate challenges are. So when we say prioritization and one of the investment portfolios fall under the Defense Production Act. And if you've paid attention to the news over the last 4 or 5 years, you've probably heard about it. They used it in case of a national emergency to fight the pandemic. All of that Defense Production Act stuff is still being used today. So we get a demand signal that says we can't make enough X. And then we have to step in and say, okay, well, the priority is you need to send these microchips to the Navy first, and then you can send them to the Army, or you need to send them to the Department of Health and Human Services prior to sending them to some private hospital. So that's really the demand signal. So we get that demand signal in, and then if you get a constant demand signal, then you have to step in and fix something. That means an investment in expanding a capability or capacity, or that could mean taking something that's produced offshore and bringing it onshore. So that's one of the major tools in the toolbox. I'm not going to steal any thunder from my team here, but there is another investment portfolio that I know Adele is going to talk about extensively. And really kind of what the point that I wanted to get across, and one of the reasons that I thought it was important for us to come down here, is because over the course of the last 2 years, we've seen sort of a shattering of the glass break in case of emergency response when it comes to the tools that we represent and the levers that we can pull in response to certain supply chain and resiliency challenges. So it's really an opportune time to be here and ask questions of, well, can we this, can we that? Because as much as we are here to network and hear some great ideas that Z mentioned, we also have a mission to educate. Folks, part of networking is, well, how do I X, Y, or Z? Well, part of that is education and meeting folks like us, like we have on this panel, that can vector you to the appropriate office or person, and then kind of help you understand, well, the reason we did this instead of this, or the reason that we pulled this investment lever as opposed to that one, or the reason we used prioritization and didn't make an investment, that type of stuff is what we're really here for. So with that, I will shut up and I will turn it over to my team.
Good to be here with you today. Adele Ratcliffe. I run the ICAM office that executes the IBAS program, one of the 2 investment programs that Anthony spoke of. Mr. Kramer asked me earlier today, what's it like working in the industrial base? Do I like it? I love it. I'm so grateful that we no longer use the term valley of death, right? To me, that is the valley of opportunity. Valley of opportunity is where you sit today. You couldn't find a more exciting time to be associated with cutting-edge technology that needs to scale and manufacture and commercialize for whether it's national security or economic security than today. Mr. Kramer spoke of the tens of billions of dollars that are being poured into recatalyzing the foundational capacities and capabilities in this country, much of which has been an impediment to our cutting-edge technology being able to scale. Within the investment program that I'm charged with leading on a daily basis, I think if we step down from the strategic framework down into now the execution, I think there's several areas that benefit communities like yours. One is just rebuilding the basic foundational capabilities and capacities to be able to machine in this country. We have a public-private partnership on machining with Oak Ridge National Lab that we call ACE, America's Cutting Edge. We're looking at a bunch of AI and humanoid robots, right, that still have hundreds of machine parts in it. So think about the relationship of what you do on the cutting edge and still needing that foundational high precision capability here in this country, and we're working to restore that. When it comes to being able to leverage, our older industries like castings and forgings, we're moving into new hybrid manufacturing technologies with new alloys and metals to be able to offset the global supply chains that we're not going to likely be able to rebuild here, but we can re-envision what you do and what you lean into. So we're pouring funds into that you'll be able to benefit from. If you're into microelectronics down in that sub-tier supply chain, breaking the black box, right, that was proprietary, now having open standards that allow you to innovate and come and go out of our ecosystem is important in secure packaging and other elements of microelectronics that we're doing. And related to your workforce, I know most of you likely are engineers, but you need a strong manufacturing base to lean into. And we're working to restore those career skills, right, to promote the prestige of manufacturing again in this country, and we need our industry partners that sit here today. But we also need to partner with people that are willing to go in and work with communities in a way that the antibodies against manufacturing don't come out. And that's what Project MFG is that Ray's going to talk about. Ample opportunity to work with you in across a broad range of capabilities. Look forward to your questions to help you figure out how to get to scale and velocity of your technology, scale and velocity of manufacturing, and scale and velocity of the workforce.
All right, can everybody hear me all right? Thank you, Adele and Z, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. My name is Ray Dick, I'm the founder of Project Manufacturing. And it's interesting hearing us talk even today. I liken us to the boots on the ground. We are the program that's going into communities and trying to assess what the situation is, how we can bring improvement, and really how we can stimulate both federal investments but also community investing in themselves. So Project Manufacturing, we do that with competitions. We run at a tactical level. We partner with training programs, high schools, and we bring students together and we throw down and have them make a product over a period of time. But that's not all we do. Project manufacturing really is a catalyst, and as complex as the workforce program is, we have to address all the different avenues of it. So as you think about what the gap is in the workforce, one of the first questions we were asked with project manufacturing was, how do we assess success? And one of the early indicators was, well, how many of your students that are going through your competition are getting a job? Well, that's easy. We're 100% successful. Because if they're going into the trades and becoming manufacturing professionals, they're getting jobs. That's not really the challenge. Where they're getting the jobs, and are there enough of them, is a much different challenge. And so we've had to broaden the scope of what it means to be project manufacturing to include touching all of the components that influence the supply chain of talent. That includes parents, teachers, counselors, educators, the people we encounter in the community. And through that, what project manufacturing has become is a stimulus of a conversation that takes and stress tests training programs to industry requirements, creates a story or a narrative with homegrown heroes, young people going into manufacturing. We push it out through a reality YouTube show called Clash of Trades, because we need to impact the people that have never heard of manufacturing. They may not even have an interest in manufacturing, but we want them to influence the young people that we need going into the trades to become manufacturers. And then finally, what we've seen as part of project manufacturing is almost every community we've been into from a tactical level has had an investment within the region in itself. And what that really means, again, being the boots on the ground, is the communities are buying new capital equipment. They're recapitalizing their trade training programs. We got a school in Southern Illinois right now in the process of buying 6 new 5-axis vertical or CNC machining cells. We've had trade training programs add 2 additional semesters of curriculum that takes it beyond the basic machining requirements to what really is needed in today's advanced manufacturing environment. And we see those kind of opportunities sprout out where communities are really stepping into the game. So at the end, project manufacturing is a competition, but it's really a movement to inspire a conversation to get folks like you, folks in the community into the game and recognize the need. To close, since we're at South by Southwest, and what I'll say is, so we focused on welding, machining, and what I would call the traditional manufacturing opportunities to date. But think of all the technologies that are evolving, and how, when they reach the production level, the workforce has to map up with the production needs. If we're not, as Project MFG, looking at the emergent technologies as part of the portfolio, we're missing the opportunity and basically kicking the can down the road for another generation.
Thanks, Ray. And thanks, everybody, for coming out to listen today. My name is John Buer. I'm the founder of ACME, the Austin Center for Manufacturing Innovation. We are a hardware innovation catalyst. ACME Group operates in 3 distinct segments with 3 affiliates. ACME Properties is a specialty real estate development firm that builds production-oriented innovation clusters. We're a fund in ACME Capital that invests in hardware startups to help them professionalize and prepare to scale, and a platform in ACME Center that leverages private capital, subject matter expertise, and a manufacturing ecosystem to support the rebuilding of the domestic industrial base to meet DoD needs. The model applies across segments, but we started this project with our initial pilot for the domestic production of critical chemicals for munitions. We focused on 8 non-energetic chemicals important to the DoD to understand their commercial uses and end markets and why they had moved offshore. That's where you start with these things, is the understanding of why. We moved to execution, and the execution task was to support domestic production through commercial producers and leverage private capital on a 10-to-1 ratio. The ultimate goal being to establish a resilient domestic supply base supported by commercial market sales that can also supply the DoD. Through this project, we've developed a number of relationships that highlight our role and our relevance. We partnered with BioMade, the newest Manufacturing USA Institute, to support new and innovative methods to use biological processes to support chemicals production, with special focus on hard-to-produce precursors. BioMade has a lot of ground to cover with its nationwide scope and mandate. I see us working together closely to efficiently and rapidly scale our mutual footprints, and for Acme Capital to support BioMade's high-growth member base. Through these activities, we will enable a resilient and distributed supply chain in the chemicals industry. As Ray mentioned, high growth from onshoring in many of these areas brings with it challenges in maintaining a skilled technical workforce. Late last year, we collaborated with Project MFG and Ray to bring an additive manufacturing competition and career exploration here to Austin. Ray's team managed and ran the event, leveraging Acme's network to secure regional manufacturers, speakers, and some local high schools to participate in the program. We have another scheduled later this year in Portland to be held at our partners facility, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center, or OMIC. OMIC is an applied R&D facility with a focus on advanced metals manufacturing and manufacturing skills training. They open their second facility next month, a 30,000 square foot facility devoted to additive manufacturing innovation, and are actively supporting the F-15 platform sustainment through a program to scan and additively manufacture high-wear, fly-ready parts. Acme and OMIC are partnered on several expansion projects, including an advanced machining and additive commercial innovation cluster funded with private capital and adjacent to the OMIC campus. Lastly, a recent collaboration with Purdue University has Acme Properties positioned to construct a hypersonics campus outside of Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane in Indiana. Here, we will leverage the activities of all of our network to speed up development of hypersonic missile systems, to train a skilled workforce, and fund emerging technology so they produce the innovations needed to regain our country's lead in this important technology. This is what Acme is, an ecosystem that encourages collaboration and provides the resources needed to advance hardware and manufacturing innovation. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you guys. So one of the things that I know from working with you and from your comments as well that really came up is the importance of local community engagement. I was actually at a Maine South by panel yesterday with a couple mayors from Richmond, Virginia and San Antonio, Texas, and they were talking about how politics start and end at the local level, right? With input going up to the federal government on what the priorities are, and then federal programs needing to be expanded, scaled, implemented, and ultimately sustained at the local level, kitchen table politics, right? So very, very important topic. Wanted to open it up to the panel for you guys to talk from your various perspectives on community engagement. What does that really mean for each of you in your positions, and maybe talk us through some examples.
So I can start. I'll let folks here get into some examples, but so far I've heard a couple of very key words, both from Mr. Kramer and the panel here. Words like exciting, valuable, important, flexible. When it comes to engagement with local communities, one of the reasons that it's so exciting to be a part of this office right now is because everything that we previously thought about the way we do business, the way we think about incentives and investments has gone almost completely out the window. And for someone like me, who has, my parents have been telling me since I was born, you come at things from a different angle. You just look at stuff different than most other people do. And that was like, in my career, you're coming out of left field. Well, there is no more left field, right? So when you say you want to make a certain type of investment, or you want to fix a problem a certain way, everyone's ears are open, up to clearly senior leadership. So when it comes to the local communities, historically we have made investments, and the DoD has made investments in companies. We need to fix this company, or we need to fix this manufacturer. That is, of course that still happens from time to time, but it's not the goal. The goal now is to invest in regions. You have regions that are important for different things like microelectronics, like shipbuilding, Certainly, as we begin and continue to onshore the mining of critical minerals, critical materials, well, the rocks are where the rocks are. So if you invest in one company, you haven't fixed that problem because you need to invest in that area. And that's what my entire team is trying to get after with their investments and their working with great folks like John about getting commercial capital, again, going back to we can't do this alone as the DoD exclusively. So from my perspective, that's the major difference over the course of the last few years is we're not going in and saving a company or fixing a company. We are really investing in regions to include, and as you will hear, major investments in workforce development. Because another thing that was previously thought that is now known to be not true is if you build it, they will come. They will not come if they don't exist. So you can build as many factories as you like, but if you don't have people, and whether those people are building the parts, stamping the parts, or running the robots that do that, they need to be people there to do it. And I think everyone's eyes, especially in our senior leadership and down through my boss, Dasdina G. Block wanted to be here, and she has really appreciated the fact that workforce has to be a part of this because people are an industrial resource, just like the buildings and the equipment. So that's all from me.
I think we've come a long way, right? We started at the technology level. We understand that we need to build an ecosystem, a vibrant ecosystem that needs all the parts. And that started at a technology space, and then we realized that humans have a vote, right? Like Anthony said. So we've moved into, when it comes to workforce, we've moved into regional communities to start to organize around, what does the region look like in terms of what workforce is needed to satisfy all aerospace and defense in that region. And that meant that has given us insight as to what the small and medium manufacturers are facing really on a daily basis. It's heads down, right? Heads down, making parts, innovating, whatever you're doing, with little time to come up and breathe and understand what the environment around you is that can help you solve your problems. So we've moved in and we've moved into regions to provide a boots on the ground perspective to pull the community together, including our Department of Labor, Department of Commerce assets, to help industry understand what is available to you in the regions to help you with all the adjacent wraparound support, because just like individuals need adjacent wraparound support to go to school, whether it's transportation, housing, or lodging, our small and medium manufacturers are also facing significant pressure of wraparound support, whether it's understanding how to contracting works, how does inflationary clauses and exemptions roll down to you, and how can you ask for assistance on inflationary, cybersecurity assistance down at that small and medium manufacturer, or whether it's just help on your workforce. So I think it means that we are operating at a much more personal level in local communities.
Yeah, so I would like to just pull that thread that Adele brought out even further and lean into something that Anthony mentioned as well. What we've seen, and we've been in probably 30 different communities in the past 18 months, and even coming out of COVID, we've stepped in it further, is the government can't be all things to everybody. The level of investments to upgrade and up talent our workforce, the investment is too large for the government to do that, just honestly. But what we see is if we can engage at the local level or the state level or the regional level, and we use the tagline, helping communities help themselves, there is the opportunity for that engagement. And those communities that do step in where we do have that kind of engagement, the leave behind is awesome. Again, it's the capital equipment, it's the revised educational programs. In those communities where we don't have engagement, we have a really good conversation, we have a really good competition, and there is no legacy to really follow on. So from project manufacturing's perspective, we have to have that local engagement. We have to have the champion on the ground in the community, because we can't come in and solve your problems without you helping to work on the solution.
Yeah, I agree. From the development and investment perspective, communities are key. They're the ones who live in those areas. They generally have a plan for what they want, development where it may be. Our role is normally welcomed and very attractive to these local municipalities. We're working with a few of them right now. Generally speaking, this means economic development, it means money for schools, it means progress for their communities. But understanding that and that open dialogue that's early and frequent ensures success. Some technologies are different than others. If you're doing additive manufacturing, you can do that in a standard office complex. If you're working with munitions or batteries or things that may have hazardous materials, soliciting input and understanding of where they'd like that to be, and if they welcome that in their communities is key for success.
That's the next generation manufacturer out there.
There you go.
Absolutely. So Anthony's comment about the Deputy Assistant Secretary reminded me that I'm actually doing double duty. She was going to be leading this panel, and I actually have a role to provide some insights into some of the programs in my portfolio here, and I realized I missed that when we went through the first round. So I want to take a moment to talk about some of the examples that Anthony mentioned of this new model of doing business and not playing whack-a-mole so much, but figuring out how do we actually take a strategic approach. And then what I'd like to do is open it up to other folks to dig into any particular examples. I think it can help us bring the strategic comments that we've all made down to maybe a bit more of a practical level. But I'll go first on that particular one. So I'll walk through a couple things that we're calling the big plays for the office, and big plays is not my name for it. That would be a little maybe egotistical if I called it that, but that's what the office is calling it at this point. Really what it is alternative approaches to take a systemic approach. And you'll hear a little bit of a theme as I go through these. So item number one is munitions campus. We actually are in the process of receiving white papers for a prototype munitions campus in Central Texas, with the idea that we would actually create these munitions campuses around the country. The idea here is pulling in state and local funding, private investment, recognizing that you're building up real estate industries, you're looking at different parts of the supply chain that you can actually co-locate. When you look at munitions in particular, some of the challenges to onshoring are the transportation and the risks associated with transporting those dangerous materials. And so if we can actually cut back on all of the different transportation that needs to happen and create these clusters, then that that can help us to create a stimulus to compete with some of the foreign supply that we've become dependent upon. So item number two is a project called Scaling Capacity and Accelerating Local Enterprises. Here, it takes a page out of some of the work that several of us have done in the research and engineering community, where you're looking at all of the different efforts to develop new technologies at the Army Research Lab, Air Force Research Lab, Navy Research Lab, the national labs around the country that the Department of Energy runs, as well as organizations like Capital Factory, Defense Innovation Unit, Army Applications Lab, AFWorks, that are all scouting new technologies, pulling in commercial technologies. So typically we're looking at those through the lens of technology gaps, and those are important, and those will absolutely continue. We've taken a different spin on that from the Acquisition and Sustainment Office's perspective and said, well, let's look at those through supply chain gaps. So when we look at gaps in the supply chain and we actually reach into these different tech scouting efforts, not to duplicate them, but to say, hey, let's engage the labs, let's engage AFWorks and DIU and others and say, what can you give us out of the technologies that you're encountering that can actually supply and address our supply chain gaps? And the idea there is that while you've got folks pushing from one side on the technology push, we would be generating a market pull and leveraging that market pull to help accelerate those technologies and move through what I love Adele's term, the valley of opportunity. Number three is a project called Defense Business Accelerator. So I mentioned these different innovation offices, and I've been involved in standing up several of them, and I'm a huge fan of the work that the teams have been doing across the board here. Most of those efforts are focused on taking commercial technology and pulling it into the Defense Department at some point in the development cycle. We have some technologies that are actually developed with an initial focus on a defense application. And those technologies kind of struggle through what I would call the dirt road of the defense bureaucracy, right? Developing these systems, and it takes a really long time. So we asked the question, what if we took those technologies that have dual use applications and we pushed them out into the commercial market, right? They may have started with a defense focus. Can we actually push them out into the commercial market and leverage the buying power and the ability to address market risk from the commercial market to accelerate the scaling of these technologies? And so that's that particular program, Defense Business Accelerator. We have another effort that's focused in particular in the microelectronics industry, looking at how do you identify areas where there's an impasse between supply and demand. So one example is ultra-high density interconnects in printed circuit boards, right? The US is printing these at 75 microns. The global standard is 25 microns. The US PCB manufacturers are not investing the capital expenditures in being able to compete globally because the demand signal isn't there, and it costs a lot of money, and from a fiduciary point of view, they can't justify those expenditures. Well, we're not creating a demand signal because we're saying, well, look, you know, they're finding workarounds to operate at 75 microns and still meet our system performance requirements, right? At some point, that's going to blow up. And so we've created this concept of developing a new company that would actually fill that market gap, and the government would step in and actually help stimulate the creation of that company. It would operate as a shared resource to fill that supply chain gap. And would support stimulating the demand that would then create that impetus to further accelerate the supply. So that's that particular piece. And then the last one is emerging defense industrial base. And so this particular one is not focused on dual use technologies, but it's recognizing that the defense market does not generally provide the 10x returns that venture capital is looking for. And so if you don't have a dual use application, but you have a defense only application, where are the opportunities to help create commercial investment for you? And so we're looking at ways that we can leverage some of the authorities and some funding stimulated by the government to offset the risk and to stimulate venture capital investment, private investment in a fund that would be focused on defense-only, non-dual use technologies. And so that's the EDIB, or Emerging Defense Industrial Base. So let me open it up to the rest of the panelists. Specific examples that might be helpful to the audience to really understand the strategic comments that you've made and how those are applying in the programs that you oversee.
Sure. So I have a couple of examples. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but this is one of the things that has changed over the course of the last 3 to 5 years. Earlier in my career, how many folks out there remember hearing a commercial when you were younger that said, you know, military grade technology? How often do you hear that in commercials trying to sell you a new product today? Not much. It's not a bad thing, but one of the reasons that happened is because if you think of industry supplying two major circles, one of them defense, one of them commercial, for many years those were distinct and separate. They have gotten closer and closer and closer. So investing in something that is DoD only is 9 times out of 10 not sustainable. So over the course of my tenure at Acquisition and Sustainment, as we were sort of getting this influx of new appropriations in, we really tried to lay out 5-year strategies that had that would produce some sort of capability that was going to be sustainable, and that means commercial use. Now, yes, on occasion, there are some things that the DoD wants complete control of because they're very unique. And one of the ways that we've tried to, again, close this valley of opportunity is obtaining some additional authorities in my office that didn't exist previously. And one major one for these defense-specific things is the ability to invest in the organic industrial base. So something that is made on a military ammunition plant that has to stay there either for safety reasons or a lot of times national security reasons. We can now invest in those areas. As far as the dual use thing, it really is a different way of looking at stuff. So everyone complains about challenges and problems, right? Every single challenge is an opportunity to fix something. And right now, one of the things that we're trying to fix is securing our supply chains as much as possible within the United States or within the vector of an allied country. So we actually just finished a call for ideas for 20 different chemicals that are used in various DoD systems, mostly weapons. But if you look at that list, it is a lot of things that are a raw material that can be turned into something through various chemistry. So if you take in the raw material, if you build that raw material, you can, through one chemical process, you will take it to a rocket motor or an explosive. But through a different chemical process, you will take it to a fertilizer or maybe a pharmaceutical drug. And if you can make investments in these new manufacturing centers that have 5, 8, 9, 12 different profit streams, this dynamic nature of government spending where we need 100,000 pounds of something and then not again for 10 years, that won't mean that 9 manufacturers for the DoD go out of business because they have 7 other profit streams. So we just finished that call. It's going to be roughly a $210 million investment. And again, thanks to senior leadership, we came at them with this investment strategy that was definitely not typical over the course of the last 2 decades, and almost no resistance. Everyone was just like, yup, love it, go forth and do. Thankfully, the president gave us the authority to do it. Congress gave us the appropriations to do it. And then, a similar sort of example from one of those sectors. So we have the munitions, and then a similar example is microelectronics. Again, can't do it alone. The DoD has to maintain their unique microelectronics requirements. Partnering with Commerce, they're sort of handling a lot of the commercial requirements. But that doesn't mean that you have one building over here or one company over here and another one over there. In some cases, it could be, and I'm oversimplifying, but for lack of a better example, you could have one manufacturing line producing microchips. And at the end of this manufacturing line, it goes right out and it's supplied to a cell phone company. And then right at the end of that manufacturing line, you make a right turn. And in that right turn, you overlay some extra security or, say, radiation hardening, and then those are the pieces that go to the Department of Defense or some other federal agency. So from my perspective, those were 2 big things over the course of the last just 2 years that we got behind and said, okay, this is a new way to solve this challenge, and we got a lot of buy-in from the interagency and, again, from senior leadership. I know these folks will have many more examples.
Yeah, similar example on RF microelectronics, where I spoke of the black box that we have typically had in our weapon systems and our radar systems. But that wasn't serving your interest as a healthy ecosystem that supported us on design and manufacturing and evolution of technology into those RF systems. So we went down, broke that black box, created open architecture standards, which seems like, hey, not mind-blowing necessarily, because commercial industry has this. That's what the 110 receptacle is, right? Make anything you want, plug it in, as long as it meets those standards, but we weren't doing that for ourselves. Broke that black box, developed those open architecture standards, pulled our industry partners in at that sub-tier level, those cutting-edge subcomponent, sub-tier suppliers to gain that buy-in, worked with the 2 major producers of that if we did this, that they would make each other's parts, and we qualified 28 new sub-tier suppliers on 2 major subcomponents, which we had obsolescence on. And that is moving forward. Why should that excite you? Because what Anthony and the under said about the billions of dollars coming in, those are the new approaches. Let's talk other opportunities on more traditional. I'm more in a traditional space, cast and forged parts right now, but that hybrid and additive manufacturing component is a critical investment stream for us. If you were in that space, I met somebody out here that's doing art with WAM. We need democratization of manufacturing using hybrid techniques, right? The intersection of additive metrology, machining, and other post-processing. If you're interested in that space, there's an opportunity for you. Let's talk digital backbone that ties us all together. We talk AI for robotics applications, but we need the same for the defense industrial base. We still need to be able to design, make, and then born qualified through that digital thread. And so there's opportunity spaces there for small companies that I know are innovating on the cutting edge, rethinking how that technology can be applied to help in that process, right? So that we can accelerate that distributed and democratized manufacturing, whether it's for typical machining or those hybrid things, or stitching you together as an ecosystem in your distributed space. And then lastly, an opportunity that we're interested in is how do you operate in that digital environment in a denied environment, right? We all operate off Wi-Fi. I've got something I'm having to go outside and I feel like a storm chaser for 5G right now as I roll around holding my hand up in certain areas of my neighborhood trying to get signal for something. What happens if we don't have that? How are we going to maintain that the equivalent of that digital thread through manufacturing when you don't have it? And so what are the technologies that we need at those point of each of those steps to be able to democratize manufacturing and innovation in that environment? And so I'll stop there for opportunities.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on my perspective in project manufacturing. First, an observation, OTAs work. Project manufacturing has been accomplished with an OTA. We're getting ready to go through our first into the production phase. And so I got to, being here, I have to let you guys know, because I go back a few years with OTAs with Z, they work. And so that's one thing I want to say is, yes, trust it and work with them when they work. The second thing is project manufacturing is disruptive. I would probably be retired if I had a nickel for every time somebody said we couldn't do it or we were going about it wrong, and we still get that. And so rather than give you examples, I'm gonna be disruptive and uncomfortable for you guys. So I'm assuming that everybody here is probably fairly highly educated. I think that seems a fairly safe assumption at South by Southwest. I'm going to look at the crowd and say, you have kids, grandkids, or want to have kids. And I'm going to ask you to sincerely think about your kids going into the trades. I've had this epiphany. I would have never considered my kids going into the trade for a whole broad set of reasons. I will challenge you guys to have that same thought. And oh, by the way, some things that we don't think about as we think about the future of our kids is that they can go into a trade and come out with little to no student debt. My kids have a lot of student debt. They can come out of the trades earning an income that exceeds a lot of college-educated jobs coming out of school. And they're going to do it in an environment that is no longer dark, dirty, and dangerous. That's old school manufacturing. Go into a modern manufacturing facility, it's well lit, it's clean, employees are taken care of in a different way. So my takeaway, my learning, and what I would challenge you guys on is, what do you see the future of your next generation, and why not consider trade manufacturing? Because there is a long life livelihood that the nation needs for security, we need for economic prosperity, and we need for our supply chain writ large.
I want to jump in on that. The Undersecretary spoke of the 2.1 million manufacturing jobs open in this country, which every one of you incubators need, right? We have a population issue. We were talking earlier about, with one technology company, about how could your technology offset population loss? If you're in that space, if you're thinking about that space, manufacturers everywhere are going to need every person that they can get. You're going to need every person that you get, and we're going to need technology that can be easily adopted by those small and medium manufacturers, of which 80% of them are less than 20 people. So any technology that you have that can help the human be the human and free up repetitive activity and any other activity that the human doesn't have to do is going to be an opportunity space that we're interested in adopting in our defense industrial base. There are only a few states in this country that have gained population. It's because of migration, population migration. You happen to be sitting in one of those. But this state alone needs more than 50,000 engineers over the next 5 years. The state system hopes to recruit 25,000 into its educational system. That translates somewhere between 125 and 150,000 career and technical education people just needed in this state, and it's climbing every day. And if you're in that west corridor that runs from here up to Washington, you're probably in the same environment. So if you're an incubator, if you're a technologist, be thinking about how your technology can be adopted at the shop floor easily by small and medium manufacturers, and you're gonna be in money.
So I'll close this out. I'm a markets guy. I bring a financial perspective to this. From the government's perspective, I look at leveraging the commercial market as a low-cost option rather than you owning the entire means of supply. That is also not our system. I also look at it from the perspective of a business owner, that if I have capital assets deployed and I can increase the uptime, or the government, the DoD, I think, spent $155 billion last year in procurement. That's a great customer. I want that as a customer for my business and for portfolio companies I invest in.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for audience questions. I know we have at least a couple, so raise your hand and the mic will come to you.
Ringer.
Why am I not surprised, Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hall-Crow. I've worked with many of the folks on the panel before and continue to work with them. But my question is actually not for me, but maybe for other people that are in the room. We hear all these great things that you're doing. How do I find out about them from the government side, and not just FPDS coming out with an RFI or an RFP, but like, what are the activities? What is the long-term plan? And then from the industry side, what are some best practices that you found in partnering with the government, finding out about opportunities, bringing opportunities to the government? Thank you.
So I can start on that one, because this has been one of the biggest challenges for my entire tenure at Acquisition and Sustainment. When I came in, people thought the Defense Production Act was, the mask program or the glove program, ventilator program. And then we kind of formed this outreach group to go as many places as we could to spread that message. And it turns out that we stumbled a little bit along the way because we were targeting industry. And almost exclusively targeting industry. And then what we quickly found out was, right down the hall in the Pentagon, there were a great number of folks that didn't actually understand the appropriate time and place to pull that lever on the Defense Production Act. So, and it wasn't just DPA, that just happens to be my history with acquisition and sustainment. So we have taken steps to really get out there more than we used to. And that's as a result of two things. Obviously, the visibility of the portfolio has gone up. The office has been elevated from a deputy-led office to an assistant secretary-led office, as Mr. Kramer mentioned earlier. So, and then the big one, that's very big news if you follow stuff like that. If you don't follow stuff like that, the financial growth of two portfolios by about 880% since 2018 tends to turn some heads. And then we didn't want to be this black hole of investment like it was many years ago. Z mentioned the whack-a-mole program, but so when I came into DPA, historically, that's what it was. You have $40 million, when something breaks, go fix it. But we couldn't do that anymore given the new appropriations. So we started to send people out and try to get this message across of, now we have resources that we never had before. So we started to attend meetings like this, Defense Manufacturing Conference, and then we started to participate in more interagency working groups. Mr. Mr. Kramer brought up the FCAP for batteries. Well, there's ones for semiconductors, there's batteries, and then the last thing I'm not going to take credit for, but my boss, Deputy Assistant Najib Locke, has sort of put us down this path of strategic communication. The entire office, not just the investment and prioritization portfolio, but the policy and transition, policy analysis and transition, as well as the global investment portfolio. So really spearheading that strategic communications effort to try to help everyone understand what we do, why we do it, when we do it, and then working through the interagency partners. So really making good points of contact in the major overlap areas so they don't get lost in the hole of point to this person, then point to that person, then point to this person. If the correct folks at Department of Commerce know who you are and they have DPA questions, they vector to us. We know who their CHIPS folks are. When we get CHIPS and science questions, we vector to them. So it's interagency, strategic communication, but again, I'll use the word living document. It is a process that is ongoing and will not ever end.
Do you want to add any on the acquisition vehicle expansion as well?
Yeah, I was going to talk to that. So for the IBAS program, most all that we do, not all of it, is done through an OT called Cornerstone, which has a tiny URL out there that you can Google IBAS Cornerstone OTA and find the link. It's free to sign up, and then you have to identify what sector you think you're self-identifying with, and that's cool. It just allows us to help understand where you think you fit in the ecosystem of the DoD, whether microelectronics or other. But every solicitation through Cornerstone goes out to every sector. So no matter what sector you sign up, you're going to get the solicitation. So those are not only IBAS, but we're servicing the other services as well. So that's a non-expiring OT with no ceiling on it. So because the industrial base is going to take years to rebuild, and so we set it up that way. No cost to industry to participate. You do need to be a member. Sign up, and then you get announcements through there about solicitations, whether they're IBAS or the other services, and there's been hundreds of millions of dollars of opportunity run through there on an annual basis. We are also now, diversifying the portfolio outside of Cornerstone to some other platforms, but we'll rebroadcast those back to the Cornerstone membership, just so those Cornerstone folks that, because people have. We set that up for IBAS, so we want to make sure that if you're there and that's where your primary beacon is focused, that you'll still get those. And then, of course, from the Industrial Base Policy Office, there's always the press releases that we're pushing up on the website that gives you the latest of what we're doing, and there's always follow-on behind that, links of contact information. But I think whether it's Anthony, myself, or anybody that downstream from us that are recipients of it, if you engage any of us, we will point you to the person that you really need to talk to. We represent the whole of the organization. When you're speaking to us, you don't have to worry about whether it's Title III or IBAS or the investment, the foreign investment side. Just find the person that you think you know, or you have an email and reach out to us, and we'll figure it out for you, right? We'll figure out who you need to talk to and go from there.
So the only other thing I'll add, and it's really sort of OT related, but sort of not. A lot of the OTAs are consortium managed, obviously, but there are some that are not. But there's some consortia not associated with an OTA. So over the course of the last 2 years, we've tried to address problems up front and trying to kind of brainstorm internally about how we were going to set up this industry engagement or that industry engagement. So now we have sort of a list, right? We started, the first two happened to be munitions related. So we contacted the National Armaments Consortium and said, look, we need these folks in this room to talk about hydroxyl terminated polyether butene, no, HTPB, sorry. And they did. They set it all up. We had, probably 75, 80 people on the phone. And then we set another one up for additive manufacturing, and there were 200 people in the room. And, I literally started my career looking through a microscope, counting molecules of RDX. So I have been in all different meetings, all different conferences. The 200 people that showed up that day were not the 200 people that I was talking about chemistry and engineering when I was in my, mid-20s. We had economists there. We had financial managers. We had representatives from different banks. We had PhD chemists, chemical engineers. And all of that happened because we just reached out to an appropriate consortium and said, we need this, please help us fill a room. We're working with Commerce to try to do the exact same thing for microelectronics. So even just being aware of what consortia are out there, I think is a really good way to kind of be on the front line, and then you don't have to sit there on FedBizOps or SAM.gov and scroll through the thousands of DoD opportunities. So I'll just mention that.
Yeah, the industry days that we host, regardless of what consortium they're with, those are very valuable because it lets you know where our primary focus is going to be and allows you to ask questions. So if you haven't participated in those are well worth it for small companies.
Yeah, so a couple of experiences, and I will only speak to project manufacturing experience as we went through the OT process. One is listen. I mean, it is really important to listen to what the government is asking for and recognize where you fit in a broader story. Workforce is a $700 million problem. We're a very small part of that, but I think we have a pretty good appreciation of how we help in many places. And so, recognizing, what you're offering in the broader strategic concept is very important. And then finally, as it goes along, truly the government, at least in my perspective and experiences, wants to collaborate. It is mutual success. And so mutual success, know where you fit in the strategy, the broader strategy, and collaboration. Listen.
I would say from my perspective as a user, as a performer, the OTAs are very receptive to value proposition. So look at a problem, design a solution, think big, and there's more receptivity now to those sorts of unique solutions than I think there was before. I also think you've got to be thoughtful about the approach and to take a systems approach to it. I can do a great job of commercializing technology, but if I don't have a pipeline on the front end of new innovations coming in, then I run out of runway. Similarly, if we build a campus but there aren't skilled workers to employ it, it shuts down and grinds to a halt. So as we've planned Acme, we've tried to be very methodical about addressing gaps and looking at the entire system.
Another plug for the OTA that is little known in many communities. How many of you have participated in an OT? All right. The reason why you really want to focus on the OT is, one, the government can talk to you, right? We can collaborate with you actively and help you cross-match to other companies that we think might work well together. But beyond that, if you're successful, the government can issue follow-on production contracts out of that. And so those production contracts aren't just for yellow widgets, right? So if it's a business practice that we're prototyping, if it's, there's wide latitude in terms of, quote, product and therefore production of product. And we have exercised several follow-on production contracts. I mean, our OT has only been up for a few years, and so it's about that time where we'd start seeing some of those if we wanted to, and we have. So that's another reason why you want to benefit to a small incubator through those OTs.
Hey, great. Yeah, perfect. Yep. I think we've got time for maybe one last question here, so go ahead.
How does software fit into this? And I'm going to give you an example. So we worked with the Air Force, developed a training product. They consider it a great success, all the way through the phase 1, through the phase 3s, licenses. It's worked. MAGCOMs are using it. That can be used directly, to your point, of 125,000 engineers that come in. It's all about cutting the training in less than training time by 80% and first-time task success up to 98%. Phenomenal results. How can that be considered as part of the ecosystem? It's all software, it's training, but it goes with what's required as part of the system of the manufacturing. How do we fit in with that?
Yeah, I was going to say that earlier, that if you had technology that you thought would help us get at scale and velocity of training, especially that CTE front, that is in need of a major evolution in how we train and reach. And so we'd be interested in understanding more about what you have to offer.
Yeah, software goes along with everything. And then the other thing I'll say is there's some major pluses and minuses to being in, a SBIR Phase 2 or an enhancement program or something like that. On the plus side, you can get through prototype development and things like that, and I participated in many of them. On the minus side, you have to, that Phase 3 is find some funding, do a commercial demo, et cetera, et cetera. From my perspective, I love them. I love them because all of the rigor that I have to put into the development of an acquisition strategy, the finding of a contract vehicle, all of that goes out the window if it's coming out of a SBIR program. So I love those. The challenge for me is how many of them are actually out there. How many SBIR programs are actually out there? With a team that is triple the size of what I have now, I could not keep track of that, even if I was trying to do it exclusively. So that's the challenge for us. So we like hearing from those companies. We like hearing from R&E on what's, what has popped as a success in their SBIR programs, because it takes a lot of the hassle out, not hassle, it takes a lot of the challenges out of, well, this is great, does everyone want it, how do we fund it, how do we build it, because that's all done. And in terms of intellectual property and government rights, it's a slam dunk for us.
Awesome. So with that, please join me in thanking the panelists for their time. And we're going to move from this into about a half-hour break. We'll be back at 4:15. We'll have the Office of Small Business Programs, which also falls under Mr. Kramer's portfolio, that's going to be talking through some really key initiatives that they have to try to make it easier for small businesses to access large resources in the department. So large resources, very important. Please come back for that. And you'll hear some examples from 4 small business leaders who have gone through those programs. They'll talk about some of the challenges and successes that they've had and some lessons from that. So please come back at 4:15 and stay for the happy hour to follow. So thanks again.
Test. Hello? Yep.
Test, test, test.
Testing, testing, testing.
Anyway.
Yep.
Test.
I'm a small business. Submitted my first proposal. Chemical system, infrared changes, tolerance, actually works really well. I'm a vendor. Sold for software. Yeah. I left my sport coach. Yeah. That'd be great. Is this skin? Yeah. I'll have to reach out. What do you do? Okay. Cool.
All right, everybody's in place, and I'm not here yet, so thank you guys. Please grab a seat, and we will go ahead and get started with this next fabulous panel. I want to introduce the moderator from the Office of Small Business Programs, Associate Director for Risk and Analytics, Dr. Bryson Reynolds. Interesting fact about Bryson, he used to work in neuroscience, worked at several universities in neuroscience, and apparently neuroscience wasn't challenging enough for him, so he decided to come work small business in the Pentagon and work on a real hard problem. So with that, let me hand it over to Bryson and his team, and he'll take it from here.
Thank you very much. My name is Bryson Reynolds, as Z said. I'm from the Office of Small Business Programs. The organizers have allowed me to talk a little bit about our office and the programs that we have and what we try to do in our office. These notes will keep me on track so I don't ramble on too long. So at OSB, we aim to reduce barriers that small businesses face in dealing and working with the Department of Defense and help them gain a foothold and succeed working with the Department of Defense. That said, we're not unaware of the difficulties that we face. We've met our small business goals for the last 7 years. However, over the last 10 years, we know that the number of small businesses in the defense industrial base has decreased by 40%. And so we're not unaware of those issues. The overall business spend, however, has increased. Under the current President Biden's administration, our office has grown considerably, and we've started, revamped, or realigned several of our office's programs. The first step was writing a new small business strategy for the department, which was released in January of this year. The strategy is not only a congressional requirement, but it's also a direct response to President Biden's commitment to promoting the competition in the American economy. The strategy reflects what those in the small business community have always known. Small businesses are vital to the entire spectrum of the Department of Defense needs. Additionally, small businesses bring innovation and agility to the DoD's mission. Next, I want to talk about our Apex accelerators, formerly known as PTACs, or Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. There are 96 PTACs spread across the country, and what they do is they work with small businesses, they work with businesses in assisting them with contracting with the government, whether that be DoD, federal, state, or local government. The Apex team has capitalized on the lessons learned and has dynamic new approaches to the challenges we've heard from small businesses that they struggle with the most. Small businesses have spoken and we have listened. Next, I want to talk about Project Spectrum. So Project Spectrum was developed to improve the collective cybersecurity of the defense industrial base. and through helping small businesses become more cyber secure. Project Spectrum has an in-house cybersecurity training program, a team of specialized cyber advisors, and cybersecurity self-assessments for CMMC and NIST, cybersecurity protocols. Project Spectrum is always working to expand its cybersecurity training options and will be expanding into other areas of small business risk, including foreign ownership, control, and influence, or FOCI. Over the first 3 years, more than 11,000 unique visitors have been assisted with Project Spectrum, and the goal is for 10x increase in the coming years. Next, I'll talk about the Rapid Innovation Fund. The RIF, Rapid Innovation Fund, was established in the 2011 NDAA as a competitive, merit-based program designed to accelerate the fielding of innovative technologies from Phase 2 cyber defense laboratories, academic efforts, and other sources into military systems, basically to help transition small businesses over the valley that exists between a successful prototype and the first DoD contract. RIF efforts are aligned to accelerate or enhance military capability, reduce development, acquisition, and sustainment or lifecycle costs in the defense acquisition programs, reduce program technical risk, and improve the timeliness and thoroughness of test and evaluation. For the fiscal year 2017 and 2019, RIF is on track to transition up to 85% of its efforts to sales of products to either the military or non-military customers. While the RIF hasn't been funded since 2019, the past success of the RIF, in addition to it being specifically called out in the new small business strategy, makes it a priority for funding in fiscal year 24 and beyond. Last, I want to talk about the Mentor Protege Program, or MPP. MPP offers funding or credit for mentor companies, reimbursable expenses when they are mentoring a protege firm, with the goal of bringing protege firms into the defense industrial base and increasing the number of their primary and subcontracts. The value for emerging small businesses to learn from those businesses that have succeeded in doing work of the department cannot be understated. The MPP has been a pilot program for 32 years, but it was made permanent in the 2023 NDAA. A couple of recent changes to the program are they've lowered the amount that a mentor has, the amount of contract that a mentor has to have a history of from 100 million to 25 million, expanding the range of companies that can be mentors. And now up to 25% of the funds from the Mentor Protege Agreement can go towards certain development costs for protege firms, including engineering, manufacturing, and software development. And coming back from 2 years of not being able to meet in person, the MPP Summit will take place later this month in Orlando, Florida, March 27th through 30th. So if you have any interest in the MPP program or any of the other programs I've talked about here today, a lot of the staff from our office will be attending the MPP Summit. So if you would like to learn more, you can Google Mentor Protege Summit, or I can talk with you after the panel. Now let's get to our great panelists. We have several small businesses who have done business with DoD and are going to talk about their path to working with DoD. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us about your business and how you got to where we are today.
All right. So my name is Tom Marlowe. I work for a company called Dark Wolf Solutions. At Dark Wolf, we provide cybersecurity, DevSecOps, software development, and digital services. I lead our cybersecurity practice, and within that practice, we have a team of about 20 to 25 penetration testers who provide white hat hacking services that can include traditional penetration testing, social engineering, forensics and analysis, and even physical pen testing. We also have a development practice that builds tools and products for our customers, and the OTAs and other programs such as CIBR have been a huge part of our growth story. We are hackers at heart. We provide room for our employees to build tools, to experiment with hardware and to experiment with software, or to build software that helps to fix our customers' problems. When we first started and we were being incubated in another company, we actually had a warehouse in the back of our office where we had fabrication equipment, a 3D printer, and to help with innovation incubation of ideas, a kegerator. With that, a number of ideas came from that group that I'll get into a little bit later that led to some of our SBIR proposals that have gone from phase 1, 2, and to 3, as well as some of our OTA transactions. I joined Dark Wolf in March of 2019, so it's been about 4 years now. We were 60 employees when I joined. We are now at 220 plus, and we're actually in a hiring surge right now. We're able to provide some really cool solutions to our government customers. We also participate in hacking competitions. We sent teams to DEF CON this year, at DEF CON 30, where we took 2 first-place finishes, including a black badge. We're getting ready for Hackasat right now. But yeah, I look forward to going into more detail about the journey.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Howdy, y'all. So in addition to looking like a bear that's learned how to wear person clothes, I run a company called Ascent Integrated Tech. Short description, we build tech for firefighters. Longer description, put sensors on the helmet and use commercial off-the-shelf wearables to tell incident command on a single pane of glass where their people are, how they're doing, and map the battle space. And I know what you're thinking, firefighters at a defense thing. What? That's crazy. We have 2 directive phase 2s with AFWERX for aircraft rescue and firefighting, as well as are in the Army's X-Tech program now.
And your name?
Oh, right. I'm Alex. It's important, right?
Thanks for the reminder of the name.
Yeah.
Matthew Arno, I head up our public sector team at Tidelift. And if you're familiar or not, you touch open source technologies every day. It's basically impossible to build applications without the use of open source libraries or dependencies, as they're called. And my company, Tidelift, we focus on that software supply chain risk management. Over the past 10 or 15 years, more and more open source is being used. And there's really a misalignment with the maintainers, as they're called, the volunteer communities that support all these open source projects that we all rely on. So part of our business model is, one, to help organizations identify the best open source projects that meet their specific requirements from a security, licensing, and maintenance perspective. And a portion of the revenue that we generate from our service and our software, we actually give back essentially to the open source community. So we partner with thousands of different open source projects around the globe, and we incentivize them to align to these emerging requirements that enterprises have, that governments have, and now are becoming mandates. If anybody saw last week, the National Cybersecurity Strategy came out. There's a lot of discussion in how to improve software supply chain, and open source is a big part of it. The government actually, for the first time, said they want to start participating more in open source ecosystems. So we feel like we're in a very interesting crossroads for our business. We've been a business for 6 years. We kind of anticipated this emerging requirement, and here we are with the unfortunate Log4j vulnerability that happened a couple of years ago. That really was a catalyst event that happened in the open source space. So yeah, we're excited to be here. We have 3 phase 2 awards, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few. But thanks for inviting us.
Great. Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Will Wilder. I'm the founder and CEO of Wilder Systems. We build robots that build airplanes. It's very clear. People have airplanes they want built. Our robots help them fabricate them, and now, thanks to the AFWERX SBIR program, repair them at the depot. We have 2 systems in place right now at Tinker Air Force Base under an AFWERX and a Rapid Sustainment Office, which is another innovation group within the U.S. Air Force, which has allowed us to adapt our dual-use technology from building airplanes to repairing them. So the use case right now is defastening, so removing and replacing skins for these large aircraft, KC-135s, B-1s, B-52s, among others. And then basically turning the robot into a giant Xerox machine. All these airplanes were built by hand in the 1960s, and so none of the holes are in the right spot according to the blueprint. So what our robot does is it reverse engineers the entire jet down to the 1,000th of an inch, so plus or minus half a sheet of notebook paper. We create a digital twin of the asset, and then we drill holes in the new skins in order to enable the maintainers to more rapidly reassemble their aircraft and return them to an aircraft availability status. So yeah, happy to talk about any technical stuff with y'all offline later, but pretty stoked to be here.
Excellent. So we have software, service, hardware, all covered. right? So am I correct that everyone has gotten a SBIR phase 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
we've gotten it.
I've never gotten a phase 1.
Okay.
I prefer to jump ahead in line.
Good, yeah, good plan if you can get it. So let's talk about your first SBIR and how did you approach that? What lessons were learned there? Where did you find success? And who wants to jump?
Sure, I can chat in first. So we, our business at least, was started more in the enterprise world, right? Consumer, large businesses is where we were focused. I used to lead that team, and we stumbled upon a couple of federal contracts along the way. We then learned about the SBIR program and started, really researching it, seeing if it would be a good decision for our business. And yeah, we applied for some phase 1s and direct to phase 2s. It took a little bit of time. I think that's one of the things, also speaking to the other panelists here, is you got to put in the effort. So we went out, found the end user and customer as you must for a phase 2, and we applied to several phase 1s. And along the way, we were able to convert one of them to a phase 2, and then we've also participated in the direct to phase 2s as well. And ours at Tidelift, we have 2 with Air Force, one with the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, and one with AFWorks, and then the third one is with DARPA. We're really excited about the DARPA one that we just started working on just this past couple months.
Excellent.
I'm happy to go next. So for our SBIR phase 1, we came up with the idea of penetration testing as a service. We have a lot of penetration testers. It can be difficult to find penetration testers. They're a very advanced form of engineer. And so we wanted to come up with a way to try to automate some of the easier tasks that they did so that humans could focus on the more high-end exploits and exploit development, looking at the nuances of software, things that don't quite as well lend themselves to automation. So PTAS was our idea, and we actually went to the Air Force's very first pitch day in New York City. We got 5 minutes to pitch the idea. The government deliberated for 5 minutes to make their evaluation, and then came back. And Dr. Will Roper at the time swiped his government purchase card through a square reader plugged into a cell phone to give us our phase 1. So that phase 1 led to a phase 2. The phase 2 then led to a sequential phase 2, and then we also got a phase 3. If I recall correctly, the phase 1 that we received from Dr. Roper was for about $60,000 to just flesh out the concept. Our first phase 3, and you can Google this, was with Ground-Based Strategic Deterrence Program for $75 million. And it was a blanket purchase agreement, meaning that the government could cut task orders off of it, and we can support all across the Air Force. So today, several years later, we are up to 32 awarded task orders on that vehicle, and it's been a huge driver of our growth.
Great. So I look forward to replicating y'all's success. So with us, our journey with AFWorks and the SBIR program has really been one of customer discovery, really listening to what the maintainers actually need. So I'll tell you a story. So I got connected with the Texas Air National Guard, the 149th Fighter Wing, through a colleague of mine at business school here at UT. And they sent me down there. I'd prepared this great briefing, business school stuff. And it was all about how we're going to use robots to depaint and repaint ailerons, H-stabs, flaps, their flight control surfaces. And so I went through the slides, and everyone was very, the maintenance group commander was there, the crew chiefs. Everyone was very patient, nodded along. And at the end, the maintenance group commander looked at the senior master sergeant, asked him, is this a good idea or not? And the guy said, no, this is a really bad idea. And so I said, all right, well, what would you like to see? And they told me, depainting and repainting, we don't really do that here at the field level, but we wash airplanes constantly, and it is not fun. And so then I said, okay, well, yeah, if we can depaint, we can certainly wash. And so we wrote that up. I did some research. It turns out the Air Force is spending about $2 billion a year hand washing jets. Okay, so it's a really cool thing that they do. The guys love it. They suit up. They get soaked. They do it between the temperatures of 40 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit, up to I think 30 knots true airspeed. So it can be windy, hot, or cold, and so it's not that fun. And so we went through that. We got the phase 1, got the phase 2, and now we've been select funded. We're negotiating our TACFI contract for this washing capability, transitioning to Global Strike Command from the F-16 System Program Office. So, like I say, we're looking forward to continued engagement with this SBIR business and transitioning eventually to a program of record.
As for me, I've been in the SBIR space for a little over 12 years now. My first SBIR I ever got was a device to jam a needle in someone's eye, suck out the aqueous humor, and run a CLIA wave test to be able to do a isothermal amplification study to look for herpesviri in the eye. So nothing to do with my current business. And a little gross. Sorry, I hope no one was eating or squeamish about eye stuff. So I've been doing SBIRs a long time. I ran the Federal and State Technology Center for the state of Illinois. I've been working on SBIRs a long time. I've gotten, personally, probably 15 plus mil in SBIRs in my life. In terms of Ascent, the first SBIR that we ever got was with the 96 Civil Engineer Squad for our location tracking and our mapping capability for Air Force Fire. And the reason why we got that and the reason why we had the success we do is because my first business, I did the thing that a lot of first-time founders do. They confuse their tech, they confuse the problem, they confuse their patents, they confuse their team, they confuse their investors, they confuse all this crap that doesn't matter for the fundamental problem. Are you solving a real problem for a real customer with real money? Are you solving a problem that costs lives, money, or time significant enough for people to throw money at that problem to make it go, away? So took a break from entrepreneurship for a while directly. Taught for a long time. I taught NSF I-Corps. I taught some programs for Army Research Lab. I taught DIA, though now they call it Foundry or Forge or something fancier. Taught some Homeland Security programming. Fundamentally always teaching, hey, you've got cool tech, but guess what? Less than 5% of US patents are ever commercialized. Most tech is stupid garbage that sits on a shelf and doesn't solve problems. So with Ascent, our focus from the very beginning, when my co-founder Paul and I met, and he had way too much meat and passed out on my floor, we focused on not, hey, let's build the single unifying dashboard for fire response. Doesn't that sound fun, brah? We focused on, let's find a real problem. So we talked to 1,900 firefighters across the United States, fair amount of those Air Force, fair amount of municipal, and we just translated the problem and translated the need for technology into our SBIR.
Are there any other small business programs, any other ways in which you've worked with the government and the government has provided, or DoD has provided assistance to help you as business owners navigate the complex relationship that can be working with and contracting with DoD?
So for me, just to mention specifically one that you talked about, although back when I used to use them a bunch, it was still called PTAX. Apex Accelerator is an infinitely cooler name, so I don't know who came up with that, but good job.
We'll say it's me.
There you go. Hey, well done, man. Well done. So one of the biggest problems that I see with young companies that go after SBIR, SITR, insert any kind of non-dilutive funding or contract here, is that there is an entire parasitic cottage industry built around stealing money from hardworking entrepreneurs who are mission-driven. They'll say things like, oh, hey, we'll get you registered on, on DSIP and DUNS and blah, 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 and we'll only charge you $5,000. Well, you can do all that yourself in an afternoon watching Netflix on one screen and slogging through government crap on the other screen. You don't have to pay anyone to do it. And if you're confused, and spoiler alert, it's too damn confusing. If you're confused by it, you can go to your PTAX, now Apex Accelerators, your FAST centers, et cetera, to find a way through the overcomplicated Byzantine nest.
Yeah, and just a little more information about our Apex Accelerators. Again, there are 96 across the country. There's one in every state except one. There's only one state without a PTAC. Multiples in some states, as you can imagine, with 50 states and 96 PTACs. You could probably do that math. So yeah, they provide technical assistance, assistance for small businesses, and working with and navigating that very complicated, potentially too complicated system in government contracting.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had started in the enterprise space, so we're just learning about all the new programs. CIBR has been obviously a great one, but we are looking at evaluating some other programs. I will say, working with DARPA was great because we kind of came through the side door, if you will, with DARPA. They were able to adopt one of our CIBRs from Air Force. So that was a great opportunity that was presented to us to be able to really expand our focus. So that's one program that was really helpful. We are a Massachusetts-based organization, so Mass Ventures also has like some matching programs. I don't know if other states where you all are from have some matching programs, but we are waiting to hear back on that. So there's a few different avenues that we're tracking outside of CIBR. I will comment one thing, because we didn't have experience as an organization like you do with CIBR. We did find value, and we are working with a CIBR kind of advisory firm that helps us with the paperwork, and they're not going to open doors for you, right? I'll say if you are looking at participating in CIBR, if you do work with one of these programs, they're not going to just give you end users and customers. You have to put in the work to find that. But we've found value in kind of program managing it because we don't have the experience. So, the portals and the paperwork and making sure you put all the right things in the right place. If you are, serious about this space and you don't have that experience, there is some, I think, value in it, but you got to weigh it with
Absolutely. Sorry, and let me just clarify my super cynical remarks. So there are some really wonderful industry partners. Joey, I don't know if you're here in this room. I told you if you didn't come to my talk, I'd be pissed. But the Outpost, for example, is super awesome. There's like 4 or 5 in the country who do provide a heck of a lot of value. And what I have a problem with is not the firms that actually provide value. And they help companies work through it, and they help them prepare a quality proposal, and they help them do all this stuff. Sometimes I think there really should be a much greater standard of success fees versus retainers, and we need fundamentally as an industry someone to come in and like clear that up and make like a crowdsourced database because there's too much crap out there. What I meant was there's way more firms out there that are bloodsuckers and parasites than there are fantastic firms that are providing value.
Yeah, I get a lot of emails, so I know you're saying for sure. But yeah, just want to clarify for folks who are thinking about using one of those.
Good luck figuring out which are which. At least I don't have advice for that. Talk to your Apex Accelerator, and they can help you. All right, are there any other programs that you want to mention that you worked with the government, or do we want to go to questions?
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments. Wilder Systems is a much more operationally focused company than some of these kind of software type organizations, but we worked with our local manufacturing extension partnership program, so that's a NIST program. Here in Central Texas, it's Southwest Research Institute. And they provided heavily subsidized consulting to help us establish our AS9100 quality management system, which enables us to sell flyaway airplane parts. So that's really important. And then another one that I'll recommend or suggest, it's run through the state. I believe it's a commerce program called STEP Grants. It's up to $5,000, so it's a small amount of money, but they kind of reimburse. So we went to the Farnborough Air Show in the UK, for example, and they'll defray some of those costs. If you go with like the state, the state of Texas, state of Oklahoma, state of Washington, they'll have booths at these delegations to these large international trade shows, and so it's for exportation support, which I would recommend. STEP Grants in Texas Department of Agriculture runs it here, and then the MEP thing is really helpful because otherwise getting a quality management system set up is challenging for someone who's never done it before.
I'd like to talk about OTAs for a moment and follow up on some of the comments from the previous panel. So OTAs, other transaction authorities, are another great way for small businesses to begin engaging with the federal government. When you're a new business or a small business, you don't necessarily have the past performance credentials that you can cite in a proposal to convince the government that you're eligible for a large prime contract, and that can be a limiter to your growth. To help offset that, in addition to SBIRs, the government also has OTAs. ATI is an organization that has a number of consortia underneath of it, which you can use to apply to an OTA. We've done work with one of the ATI consortia, the Information Warfare Research Project for the US Navy. Prior to that, and going way back in history for a moment, Darkwolf was incubated in another company called Wolfden Associates that primarily helped other businesses grow their government business. And so as part of that, Wolfden Technical Solutions started up with the goal to bring high-end technology solutions directly to the government. We focused on cybersecurity and what was emerging at the time with DevOps. We joined consortium. One of the consortia that we joined was the System of Systems Consortium, or SOSEC. We did that so that we could see a flow of opportunities on which we could bid that didn't have those stringent past performance requirements and were aligned with what we wanted to do. So through that, we found an opportunity called the Agile DevSecOps and Microservices Development Pilot. And that was closely aligned to some capabilities that we were trying to build around DevSecOps, microservices, and application modernization and containerization. It was for a customer out of Offutt Air Force Base. We knew nothing about this customer. We had never worked with them before. We were brand new to SOSEC, really, and this was a complete outside chance, but we decided to just take a shot at it. The proposal was a long and involved process. We went through it. The CEO, when we submitted it, I think his quote was that he felt it was the worst proposal we had ever submitted. But we took that chance, and to our great surprise, we won. And so now we're a company in Northern Virginia that needs to open an office out in Omaha, as well as hire in Omaha. One of the advantages of the OTA is that because the government was trying to get at small businesses who had not previously worked with the government and wouldn't necessarily have cleared personnel, they were willing to work with us to get people into the clearance pipeline who hadn't worked with the government before. So at the time, there was actually a transportation services company in Omaha that was having layoffs. We scooped up a number of their engineers who knew DevSecOps and some of the early starts of it, as well as software developers. And that's how we staffed the contract. We got them through the clearance process, the government worked with us, and we still have that work today, actually, as part of one of our SBIR Phase 3 task orders. All of those engineers, for the most part, still work with us, and it was a huge success. So I definitely encourage looking into OTAs. What was also mentioned on the previous panel, and kind of another example, are the prototype contracts and the production contracts. So we competed on an OTA that was let directly by SOCOM. It didn't come out through a consortium. And it was us and one other company that won the prototype contract to develop some AI ML software for analyzing images, making predictions off of that, and feeding reports back to the government. The prototype contract was for a few $100,000. The production contract was over $100 million, and they were going to give this to a small business. We unfortunately lost. But when you're in this process with OTAs and SBIRs and you're meeting and working with your customers, treat every single one like a priority customer, do your best work, because although we lost that OTA, that customer recommended us to a different service, completely different customer that, again, we had never worked with before, that spun up a new task order on our SBIR BPA for 20 FTE and has it spread across the country. So those kinds of opportunities are going to come, and as best as I can tell it, it was just because we took a shot simply because the opportunity was just aligned with what we wanted to do.
Yeah, great. Any other notes on OTAs?
Oh, sorry, not OTAs. I do.
All right, go ahead.
So kind of buried the lead here a little bit. You talked about your state's matching program. Last time I checked, 29 states offer a matching program, which it'll be sometimes 1-to-1, sometimes 50 cents in the dollar, sometimes up to a limit, sometimes specific programs, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, many, many states have specific programs to allow you to, not double dip, that sounds unethical, but to increase the efficiency of the capital, the non-dilutive capital, or the contract that you're getting from Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam may or may not be your favorite uncle, but he's by far your wealthiest. So fundamentally, these programs, the SIBR programs, the OTAs, the state matching, in my opinion, they are the most absolutely critical program that we have for embracing our culture of innovation and our national security. There's nothing else more important. And the fact that small businesses like ours can go after these kinds of opportunities and offset high technical risk, but really kick-ass stuff, is amazing.
Just to comment on SIBRs, a SIBR phase 1 settles your competition requirement for any phase 2 or phase 3, as does the direct fit to phase 2. So what that means is that if Air Force is the one that granted you your SIBR phase 1, Air Force and any other agency in the government can sole source you a phase 3 without having to go to competition. What's more, that graduates with you in case you do become a large business. So those phase 1s not only give funding for your research projects that you have, but they also create a vehicle that your customers can get to you on.
Excellent. Yeah, great note. All right. I did not ask what time we end. So 5:30. So we got lots of good time for questions. All right. So good questions from the audience. Do we have some? I think microphone's coming.
Thanks. I actually just have something to add to the consortium model conversation. So if you Google a report titled The Power of Many, I may have authored it with a colleague of mine. It has all the value propositions that the consortium model, which mainly uses OTs, offers, but at the end, it has a list of all the consortia and what their technology focus areas are. That's a good list, and then I have a colleague from MITRE sitting over here, and MITRE actually has a really good OT consortium model information on their website as well. So just to add to the conversation.
Thank you. Any questions? We have one back there.
Thank you. We covered a lot today on the procurement process. How do we find out where the opportunities are? You know, in terms of actually understanding what the needs is, per that gentleman with the beard. Sorry, said. But you know, that whole match between product and customer need is so vital. But where are these conversations happening, and how do we get plugged into that?
Great question.
That's a fantastic question. So first, it's tough. Hubris lives in the hearts of all humans, and it's very easy to confuse. I'm building this super cool tech with people actually give a crap about it. Like I said, I taught for 5 years a whole myriad of programs from NSF to ARLTA, et cetera, on go talk to humans, go understand the operational pain as well as the transactional hurdles. Because if you only have, excuse me, if you only have one of those, you'll fail. Period. Like you might get, you know, a little bit of funding here or there, whether, you know, some OEM or, you know, some SIBR or whatever. But fundamentally, if you don't understand both of those, you'll fail eventually, probably sooner rather than later. So it comes down to talking to humans, which as an engineer, it's very hard. I'm terrified of conversation. I'm actively sweating right now. This is horrible. This is very scary to me. But fundamentally, talking to people, not presenting the tech. So, like I said, my first business, I did what a lot of first-time founders do. I was building a portable modular lab for like CBER and assays out in the Veld. And I did the thing that most first founders do, where they say, hey, look at what I built. Aren't I smart? Like, aren't you going to buy this? Aren't you going to give me a bunch of money? No one cares about any of that. So at Ascent, we've talked to over 1,900 firefighters across the US. We've suited up and gone into burning buildings with them. It's very difficult for me to go into a burning building because I can't achieve face seal with a mask. I feel like crap for the next week thereafter. And it's probably going to severely affect my health at one point. But there is no substitute for talking to humans. So when I ran the I-Corps program in Hacking for Defense, I would make my students go talk to 20 people a week. And A good average is like 8% between, hey, I want to talk to you about your problem, which is weird because humans' favorite subjects are ourselves and there are problems. We love to complain and we love to brag, right? But it is so hard to get people to talk to you and then to actually distill that knowledge into something actionable and useful for a business. There is no shortage for, there's no substitute for actually talking to people. I think that's what you were asking, but if you were asking more the flip side of, okay, so I've identified a problem, how do I actually solve this? No matter the technology you're building, it's going to be a super absolute statement. If y'all haven't noticed, I love absolute statements. No matter the tech you're building, no matter the market you're building, there is a CIBR or an OTA or a CIDR, there is a topic area out there at one of the agencies. Maybe it's DoD, maybe it's NSF, maybe it's USDA, maybe it's NOAA and the like 2 solicitations they ever have a year, 2 proposals they fund. But fundamentally, if you're solving a real problem with real technical challenge and a real customer with real money, then there is a program to support the building of that, period. But what you got to do is the hard part. You got to do the math, right? You got to show your work. You have to show serious, incredible evidence that people give a crap. The best way to show that is sales. That's what buys the Big Macs. But even something like letters of support from a big OEM who would buy a whole bunch of the unit or just anything showing humans care about this and want to throw money about this after this, which will de-risk Uncle Sam's investment.
Let me just address your direct question, though, which was how do you find people to talk to? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, let me answer that very clearly. Yeah, okay, so probably 3 key elements here. 1, AFWERX Collider events. Sign up for them, go to them in person, go to them online, and post your questions in DSIP in advance so that they get answered. But that's a great way to engage directly with folks that have problems. 2, the next big thing that I would suggest is that whatever industry that you want to start a business in, there's probably a trade show of some type. I go to MRO Americas, I go to AeroDef. There's a couple of trade shows related to aircraft manufacturing and maintenance. I go to them, and you just have to be ready to talk to strangers. That's a really big thing. And then as a kind of corollary to that, there's always a happy hour, and leave your tab open, and people will talk to you. And it works every time. And so you can talk to folks, and especially if you're talking to defense maintainers, that it's great. They're good guys typically. So that's my advice: is go to the trade shows, go to all the the AFWERX Collider events, and then we actually belong to the Vertical Lift Consortium, which is an ATI consortium. They have at least one annual meeting. Every time they do the technical calls for proposal, they have these kind of Collider events as well in Huntsville, Alabama. And same concept. There's sort of a trade show aspect. There's matchmaking, and then there's always a happy hour. So go to all of those things, and you will find folks who can speak to their problems, and then you document them in a CRM, and then ultimately you will distill the problem. But go to everything.
Yeah, I can validate that as well. As I said, a year ago I was focused on enterprise and commercial, but yeah, I mean, just going out over the last year, the relationships you form. The navigating is huge, right? Speaking to people, trade shows. There's a happy hour actually after this, I think, right after. So, but I don't know if this answers your question too. One of the things that we were successful with, you mentioned AFWERX. One of you, AFWERX has the open topic, and so that's where this all started. And when the CIBR program got renewed last year, one of the requirements is that every agency needs to offer an open topic. So. Even if you don't see a topic that aligns to your specific technology or solution, you can apply to the open topic, and I think it's going to open up the aperture at other agencies for all of us as well. I will say when you do work with somebody and they put a topic out there, that's really good, right? It's kind of like the old, again, in the commercial space, like if you're not working on an RFI or RFP with your customer, you're probably not going to win it. And so when you're at the table and helping them create that topic, that's a real great partnership and typically win.
But to meet the guys, to help shape the requirement, you have to meet them first. So that's the most important thing, is you got to be real friendly and take a lot of notes.
Yeah. I want to jump in just with one other piece too, related to a panel we have tomorrow. So the cracking the code, navigating the defense market. Your question is the focus of that panel, and there's actually an information product coming out related to it as well. Great comments on the stage. What we've done and are doing is collecting these types of insights and tips so that all of those consultants that, like myself, right, to some extent, that charge money to take to help you and take individual companies down that road, we want to level set a little bit to say, hey, let's at least give you some of the secret tips so that you don't have to spend a bunch of money on consultants to give you that, and can actually get that insight yourself. And so there's a handful of resources in there. There's insights on, hey, open topic, what is that? What do I expect? How do I set expectations? How do I understand what's out there? And how do I then decide, is that the right solution for my business, for example, or do I want to pick a different one? So that's what this is all about. So come 12:30 tomorrow on the 8th floor Capitol Factory for the panel, and then there'll be an information product coming out after that as well. So.
One quick thing that I wanted to add. First, sorry for not actually answering your question. I gave strategic and operational rather than the tactical level, so I'll do that. Verbal communication is hard, right? So another fantastic organization to get connected and understand the needs of the warfighter, and probably if you're listening to this talk, it's probably what you're interested in, I'm guessing, is Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, def.org. It's a nonprofit. They are absolutely incredible. I run the Chicago chapter. Trish, who was here, just left. She's awesome. She's the ED. But go on to def.org. It's free to join. And you'll join a Slack channel with many, many members. And there's an intro channel. And on this intro channel, say, hey, I'm Alex, and I want to build technology for Air Force Fire Rescue. I want to talk to some Air Force firefighters. I want to understand the problem. And you'll get probably 20 to 30 responses. 10 of those will be like, hey, yep, that's what I do, let's talk. Another 10 will be random nonsense, and another 10 will be, I'm not that person, but hey, I grab beers all the time with 5 or 6 of them. And you'll get a huge amount of that direct, high throughput, high interaction operational discovery.
I'm going to pile on with one more organization to check out. I'll do a plug for them. They're called GovMates. They're based in Northern Virginia. Their tagline is not your mother's matchmaking. That's what they do between companies, with companies to the government. I fully encourage you to check them out.
Awesome. Question?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I was going to ask a quick one here. So at the start, someone I think had mentioned transitioning to a program of record, and that's something that we hear a lot in the innovation space, right? A company wants to transition, but for a dual-use company, and it seems like most of your technologies are dual-use, correct me if I'm wrong, but for you, working in the defense space and also having some commercial lines, commercial business that you're pursuing, what constitutes success in your mind? Because a program of record, I think, is distorted or interpreted in different ways, right? F-35 is a program of record, but for some of your services and your products, they may never be a program, a single budget line in a DoD budget. But what constitutes success, in your mind? What is a program of record for you?
I mean, for us, we have a physical product that could be stock numbered and actually be a program of like an actual program of record, a line number to procure, so acquire and sustain our mobile robotic drilling equipment. So that would be success in that sense. The other alternative is we're offering it as a service using O&M dollars. So robots as a service for drilling airplanes, but that would be success as well, as to get consistent. O&M is 1 year money, so it's not great. You have to continuously get that re-upped and demonstrate your value. So if they keep doing it, it means that you're probably doing the right thing. But that would be success for us. Is that clear? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess on that same point though, what scale would you constitute success? Like you have 2 depots. They like your product. Is that success? Is that enough to stay in the defense business and deal with all the defense things, or is that at some point as you're like, if I need to be at all the depots for this to be a continuing business for me? I guess that's
I mean, I think, our assessment of the market for our type of robots is, on the order of, 500 to 600 machines across the defense sustainment enterprise. So, that's a $1 billion revenue business. That would be satisfactory.
I could say from a tide lift perspective, we know that open source is being used widely. So, obviously transitioning into our core subscription model is what we'd like to do, right? We're not necessarily in the business of one-time revenue, which is what a SIBR essentially is. So we want to transition it to the recurring subscription service that we offer. The other thing, with our model, with the open source maintainers that we work with, different maintainers than you work with, but these software maintainers, we almost think it's the responsibility of the federal government. And again, this was in the cyber strategy, cybersecurity strategy. This came out. That's a great role for the government to play, right? Because again, all your banking, all your insurance companies, every website you touch is going to use open source technology. And so we think a transition for our platform would be quite sizable, with the government really helping to support this really critical infrastructure.
My company was one of the early open topic AppWorks phase 1 selects, 19.3 cohort. And then 20.1, I believe, was, we were also selected for phase 2, but the funding was pulled for COVID, which left us to raise the TRL and develop our product. So now we're building the bridge from phase 1 to phase 3 with a customer outside the Air Force, another agency, specifically the Navy, and educating them on this authorization, which comes from a very minimal phase 1 to connect the dots to what would be the line items in a contract for what we're authorized to deliver, to include what derived from that phase 1, which has grown massively since, our capabilities have grown massively since 2019. Any guidance on how to educate contracting offices that are not familiar, not just within the Air Force, which I know is already a challenge, educating across the DAF, but instead another branch, and specifically from AppWorks, phase 1 to phase 3.
Our phase 1 was through AppWorks, and our phase 2 was through AppWorks as well. In fact, AppWorks did a matching with our phase 2 customer to help fund that project. And you're hitting on, I think, one of the biggest challenges in that the Air Force has been very forward-leaning with SIBR authorities and awarding phase 1s, 2s, and especially 3s. I actually have pulled up on my phone the United States Code that states that if you have a SIBR phase 1, you have settled your competition requirements. And our biggest challenge is convincing contracts officers that they can use that to award us a phase 1 or a phase 2 or 3 without competition, and they won't go to jail for it. So, and I think that it's that person-to-person talking, and it's also finding those parts of the agency that you're working with that are open to SIBRs. I'd be happy to talk with you offline about what we've seen with regards to other parts of the Navy that are open to SIBRs. We would love to see more, especially at DHS, and we'd love to see maybe some more SIBR activity there as well. But certainly across the DoD, for the most part, they're very open to SIBRs to bring in those new technologies from industry.
Howdy, my name is Caleb Holt, and I build ground robotic platforms. My question, I totally get all the innovation, the SBIR dollars and things of that nature. One of the main reasons I came, other than knowing the Viking, is I read that I read about the defense industrial base, specifically narrative around the ATI program that you guys are running here at the Capitol Factory. And so I'm curious, no offense to the two gentlemen that are doing more software-oriented stuff, but like with Ascent Technologies and then also with Will, when you're really going to grow and start providing significant amount of hardware, and you've got to have supply chain, and you've got to deal with, where are you going to source that stuff from, and how is that going to play into it? Is there dollars that you're aware of in that space that's going to help you be able to scale to a meaningful number that would allow you to be viewed as someone who, in fact can go to program of record and can provide, an ongoing sustainment option for the military? These are the struggles that we have as a small company, and We have 5 manufacturing companies that we started in the last 3 years, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of supply chain integrity, the strategy of Wilder Systems has been to exclusively select, controls and electronic components from reputable suppliers. So we work exclusively with Siemens for our PLC systems, for programmable logic controllers, as well as the edge IoT PCs that we use for our AI stuff on the robots. So, I mean, that's really important. I think you bring up really good points. So the electronics obviously is really critical to obviously the function of our system, but also it's the #1 risk for supply chain integrity. It's otherwise, bent, cut, welded steel, not a big deal. Powder coaters aren't going to do anything crazy. So, yeah, I mean, I would just advise you as you think about supply chain integrity to really focus on, traceable components and, going through authorized distribution channels. And then in your POs, you can also demand reps and warranties. So that's something to think about.
Okay, I have a digital health company, and I see that you guys work with MTech and with the DHA. Is that a correct assumption of mine? And if so, who do I talk to with the technology we have? We've got breakthrough technologies that we want to provide to the military treatment facilities. And do I go to the DHA directly? Do I have to work with you guys? What's the easiest route for me to not engage with all this, lot of red tape and those possibilities?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Elaine Samara. I work for Advanced Technology International. There's a bunch of people in this room that wears the ATI badge.
Can you raise your hands if you're...
If the ATI folks could raise their hands. Right behind me is two posters that has all of the programs that are currently funded. If you want to get involved in any of them, find one of us and we'll definitely get you connected in that program office. There's actually one missing one, which we just won a few months ago. It's T-Rex 2. So you're doing anything related to simulation and training. That's another program that we have. So thank you for being here today, and we'll turn it over to who's.
So I just wanted to, the supply chain question that was asked earlier, and Matt and I have talked about this, it was targeted at hardware, but I thought it was really interesting some of the comments that Matt had previously about software supply chain. So I just wanted to turn that back and not let you off the hook for talking about the importance of supply chain from a software point of view as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, software's, I mean, I don't, even your hardware, I mean, it's rare to have any hardware not running in some sort of software, or your business systems, of course. And so, yeah, these emerging requirements, it's extremely timely. I mentioned it now. I'll mention a third time. The National Cybersecurity Strategy that was released encompasses a few different papers, if you will, that have come over last year. One is an OMB memorandum called M2218, and if you're not familiar with that, you should probably get familiar if you're doing any software, because the government and your customers are going to require you understanding where your software supply chain. So just definitely pay attention to the emerging requirements, because it could be the difference between you getting a contract or not. There's a movement around software bills of material. That's kind of the first step to understand your inventory, all the different components that are compiled together under the hood, so to speak, with your software. And if you're also in the government, you should know your kind of bill of rights, if you will. You can start, later this year, requiring your vendors to provide you that ingredients list, that software bill of materials, so you know what's in the software that you're purchasing. It's kind of crazy to think about that's not a requirement today, because every time you buy a Snickers bar or Reese's, you see every single ingredient that's in there. We don't have that for software, but over the next several years, there's sweeping changes that's going to really require you to understand that software supply chain. So yeah, thanks for calling that out.
Question over here.
Check. Good afternoon. Question is, been a lot of discussion about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3
transition to POR. Can anyone speak to a transition path through a large prime? Like, so instead of working directly with the government, working through a Boeing, a Lockheed, a this, a that, and that transition path.
Yeah, I can tackle some of that. So we're working closely with Bell Helicopters on under a SBIR Phase 2. They're actually our sub. Bell is our sub on the SBIR Phase 2, but eventually that'll flip as the program ramps up to produce the V-280 at scale. So, I mean, that is our intent. This is an Army SBIR, obviously, making Army helicopters. So, yeah, that is one strategy to go forward with, is that they can use the SBIR sole source justification to procure our systems, which I believe they intend to do.
And I guess a quick follow-up, is that kind of the purpose of the mentor protege program, to have the larger primes mentor a small company and then kind of transition path through them?
Yep, you nailed it.
As part of the small business.
Yep. Yeah, so the mentor protege program does exactly that. Matching generally a larger prime with a smaller company that's getting into the defense industrial base, generally starting as a sub to that prime's contracts, but then transition up to be their own primary contractor.
Related to that, actually, for OTAs, one of the requirements you have to meet in order to bid on an OTA usually is that you're a non-traditional defense contractor. How that's specifically defined is that you have not worked on a defense contract within the past year that required you to comply with the cost accounting standards. That usually means is that you haven't had a cost plus contract. So what some OTAs will come out as, a large prime may be interested in bidding the OTA, and so they'll bring your non-traditional company on board in order to qualify it, and usually as part of that, they have to give you a healthy percentage of the work share. You can be their subcontractor, or they can be your subcontractor and back you since you're the NTDC. Just another route to go.
Excellent.
I actually have a question, an audience question maybe for the panelists. So again, we enterprise moving into this world of SBIRs, like an OTA is foreign to us. So how did I guess, can you talk a little bit about your experience of how did you, I'm sitting here, I go to these events, everybody talks about the valley of death, and I'm trying to avoid that valley of death. And I'm fortunate to be on the panel with you, so I'll follow up to learn about OTAs, but how did you learn about that? How did you get into that?
Well, the valley of opportunity from the last panel. So it's a very real thing, and I think that one of the comments I wanted to make, it wasn't directly related to your earlier question as to how to meet new customers. There's I think the absolutely valid model of getting out into industry, getting out into events. But what I tell my teams repeatedly, especially when I have folks at the associate and senior associate level ask me, well, what can I do for business development? My immediate response is do a good job for your client and become a trusted advisor. And through that, they will make recommendations to their friends in other programs, and that's how you can get more contracts. For us to cross the valley of death, I think opportunity. That's how we did it. We got our phase 1, and while we had our phase 1, we were networking with potential customers for the phase 2. The Air Force has a fantastic innovation ecosystem with its software factories. So there's Platform 1, Kessel Run, Bespin, Thundercamp, Kobayashi Maru. We were really, and we still are, in that ecosystem, helping to build out DevSecOps and cybersecurity capabilities, as well as provide software development services. So we networked within that ecosystem and got folks interested in what we were doing, and that's how we were able to get from, to get a phase 2, and we had a sponsor for the phase 2. What really helped with our phase 2, though, were the matching funds that AFWorks put in. I think at 4-to-1 is what it was. And then while we were doing that, we met specifically at Platform 1 and at GBSD, folks who were interested in what we were developing, as well as some of the spin-off technologies that were coming out of it, and that's how we were able to get to the phase 3. At Dark Wolf, we actually work with a number of small businesses who are trying to get across to that valley. One of the major stepping stones, if you will, is the information security requirements. So you have to get a product onto a government network, and the government has told you that you need an ATO. Well, what is that? That's compliance with the risk management framework. It can be a ton of paperwork. And so getting familiar with the risk management framework process and the basic artifacts that are involved, like a system security plan, and understanding on the other side who has to approve your software from a security perspective are key to getting across that.
Thanks.
Yep.
Other questions from the crowd? No more questions from the crowd? I'm gonna have to come up with questions myself. Yep, all right, we got a couple. I feel like I've guilted a couple people into asking questions.
Just wanted to kind of hit a little bit more on the difference. I know, so people that haven't had the AFWorks SIBRs or any SIBRs or anything before, and then getting into the cost plus and everything, can you kind of describe the difference, in that format, and then the difference that you've got to take in the systems behind so for instance, your accounting software and everything to be able to make that adjustment and that kind of growth curve?
Yeah, so we started on TurboTax, or QuickBooks, I'm sorry. And, but when we were really small and when we first spun off from Wolf Den, we were about 50, 60 employees. That was good enough to manage the firm fixed price contracts that we had. But certainly as we began to scale, we had to scale our accounting system as well, because as you get bigger, you become more and more subject to government requirements that are also subject to audit. And that's a major risk management function for the C-suite. So from that perspective, but we're not accountants. Like, we don't want to get into the accounting business, and we don't want to spend a whole lot of time with it either, frankly. There's a lot of wonderful firms out there. I can talk to you about afterwards about the one that we use that provides all of our accounting services for us. They provide our timekeeping system, which is a government compliant timekeeping system, and take a lot of that burden off of us. It's just as you get larger and you get more employees, you get more complicated contracts, it's just important. Compliance starts to come up on the radar some. And for us, we outsourced a lot of those functions.
Outsource everything. In that area. You're not going to figure it out. Or I don't know, but holy cow.
Yeah, I have another comment. I don't know if it's directly your question, but something that I think is relevant. I think it's the same as like pleasing your customer. One of the things that I've been exposed to now that we have 3 phase 2s is just the reporting that the customers expect. And we have a great team, and the SIBRs enabled us to move and shift people to specifically focus on these SIBR and federal contracts. So we have a customer success team, a solution architect, and people that are just focused on these SIBRs. And that's really important because you need to support them, and there are going to be a whole bunch of specific requirements from your customer. But where I'm going with this is the feedback we've gotten, right, of being attentive, getting things in the right format on time. The core, the contracting officers, they've shared how pleased they are with us. So you can really set yourself apart, not only with pleasing your customer, but also pleasing like the accounting and the reporting part of it. From what I've seen in my short term, I don't know if you all have better experiences there, but even though they're not your customer, they're going to help make sure that your customer knows that you're doing a good job from that perspective.
Thank you. As someone new to the land of opportunity, it's quite overwhelming. You guys have given a lot of good tips today. But what other online resources are you aware of? You mentioned def.org and GovMates. There's no substitute for meeting in person, but any other online resources to kind of navigate this space?
Well, I could say, one of the things that we did to crack into some of the agencies or some of the conversations is most of the website, most of the programs, they'll have some sort of vendor page, right? And so there'll be information there about events, but also there's an ability to schedule meetings oftentimes, and those aren't your customer, but they'll provide information of, again, what events they're going to be at, what webinars. So I would recommend, certainly you can't do them all, of course, but making a list, 10, 15 that are a good opportunity for your firm, and trying to engage directly with them at first. And don't just do that, right? You have to go to the events, you have to go to the happy hours, but make sure you're also going to the program offices, because they can plug you into different opportunities. So that's been helpful for us. And LinkedIn is a huge one, at least for the DoD and Air Force. extremely active, right? I mean, that's where we learned about Platform One, and that kind of enabled us to learn about cyber. Connect with people, get into the community. I mean, my whole feed now is like DoD stuff, which is obviously my area of focus now, but a year ago it wasn't like that. And that's really enabled me to create relationships, know where people are going, webinars, events, people really are active there.
I'll add that depending on what type of technology it is that you're attempting to commercialize with the government, if it's something that goes to an Air Force base, every Air Force base has a small business office who's and they have a phone number, and if you call it, they'll pick up every time, seriously. And so you can call them and tell them, like, I've called bases which super generic, like concepts, like, hey, I want to talk to somebody generically about drilling holes in sheet metal, and they'll like take some notes and then call me back like 2 days later, hey, you should talk to Sergeant whatever. And so the small business offices are awesome. And so you just tell them like generally what you want to do and they'll help you. So, or they've helped me.
I second that recommendation as someone from a small business office.
Additionally, I would add to things that are on specific air bases, spark cells.
Oh yeah.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but a sizable enough to make a difference. Majority of air bases do have a spark cell. I have found some of the most incredible, forward-thinking, just fantastic, like see problems and want to fix them at spark cells at every single air base we work with. We started working with the spark cells. Additionally, the Defense Venture Fellows program and the Skill Bridge program are fantastic resources for getting our warfighters integrated and back into civilian life with Skill Bridge, and then getting them to learn some of the principles that we have to execute as entrepreneurs, which surprisingly ain't that different from what they have to use in their day job, right? It's all OODA loop. Yeah, so those three programs I find are really incredible for crossing that gulf between, hey, I build tech, and hey, I have a problem.
Do we have time for a couple more?
So one thing I know I've talked with all of you about, and I wanted to ask here, as a small business, as a growing business, sometimes access to capital can be prioritized over business objectives and what makes sense long-term for business. And so DoD making capital access easy is a good thing in many ways, but it can also be a bad thing if it steers you down a path that really isn't right for your business. So I wanted to just ask for you guys to talk a little bit about your experience with balancing the need for access to capital to pay the bills and some of the DoD programs with making those tough business decisions as business leaders that say, you know what, I'm not going to go down this path because it's not really right for my business.
Yeah, well, I could, again, moving into a more federal focus, I actually created a business plan for my peers on the leadership team, right? And I head up our business development, piece of it, and the pitch internally was like, hey, if we're going to be serious about the federal space, this is much larger than just a sales and business development effort, right? We need to be prepared, obviously marketing, but also customer success, our systems, we're infrastructure, our development teams, our hiring practices. So I think it's a great valid point, right? You just can't go and say, I'm going to do a SIBR and hope for the best, right? You have to really know you want to work in the federal space, and the topics that you might submit, it has to be aligned to your roadmap, right? It can't be outside of your roadmap, and you have to, customers, end users and customers are all the time trying to bring you in different ways, but yeah, unless that's your strategy is to kind of just, do what they're asking, you have to push back and say that doesn't jive with our business objectives. So it's very important, but make sure your whole team is on board, I would say.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. So fundamentally, bad startups starve because no one cares what they're building. But the other side of that evil coin is once you get to a certain point and you have the capacity and the bandwidth to write a likely fundable proposal, and you have the bandwidth to find proposals that could fit within your roadmap, like they were saying, it's really easy to just keep going after more and more, right? It's like the same thing when you're raising unsafes. They're like crack. You just keep going, you just keep going, you just keep submitting, you just keep submitting, and then you find out that your tech development plan, your business plan, like where you actually have to go to achieve the mission can get corrupted and can get diluted. So once you reach a certain point, it's more important, in my opinion, to not go after a potential cyber avenue than it is to go after one. Because there's so many more opportunities that could meet where you need to go that you can find yourself as a team building crap you never set out to build.
I think, and it's for us, it's been interesting because I don't think we've said no to anything yet. We keep saying yes. So because we're excited and we want to keep growing, and when customers come to us, we feel like we can't say no. So it's important to keep growing. I want to just pick up on something you mentioned, the Skills Bridge program. +1. Look into SkillsBridge for employees for your company. It is a fantastic program for folks transitioning out of the military. The military will continue to pay their salaries while they work for you as an intern. It's a great way to start getting them acclimated to industry, to evaluate whether or not that they're a good fit for your company, and we've had huge success with it. So it's a great way to staff when, like us, you keep saying yes.
I think these guys nailed it. Have a plan and don't be distracted. And I guess the last thing I would add is that if you go down an R&D pathway and it's not working, kill it, because time is your most precious commodity. So do not hesitate to eliminate paths that are not effective.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, the happy hour setup is set up, and we've dropped a whole lot of knowledge up here. So join me in thanking these guys for their time, their experience. Fantastic. Stick around for the happy hour. Talk to folks. Thanks again to ATI for sponsoring that. Happy hour and this whole event. And come back tomorrow, 8th floor, 10:15 we start. And that navigating the defense market tips is right after lunch in the same place. And we've got a couple other panels the rest of the afternoon. But thank you so much. Enjoy the happy hour. Great job, guys. That was awesome. Nailed it, man. That was great. Thank you, guys. That was so awesome.